So once again, ladies and gentlemen, let me all welcome you here at a conference, Pharmaceutical Strategy for Europe, organized by the Czech Association of the Innovative Pharmaceutical Industry in cooperation with FPA, the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations, under the Czech Presidency of the Council of the EU. We've met at the beginning of June in Prague, in the building and hall of the Senate of the Parliament of the Czech Republic, to speak about the fundamental effects of innovative treatment on the whole healthcare system and what the EU needs not to stay behind when it comes to innovations and not to be dependent when it comes to pharmaceutical production. Currently, 48% of all innovative treatment comes from the US. EU stays behind with 22% only. And the research goes ahead much faster in the US than here. The new EU pharma legislation aims to change it, and that is what we are going to talk about here, about pharmaceutical strategy, its implementation, achievements and challenges. And let me thank here to the permanent representation of the Czech Republic to the EU that helped to make this happen and provided us with the space to meet. We will have two panels where I hope you will all take your part. We will be more than happy to ask your questions. You may ask via Slido, so you will need the Wi-Fi and the password. And then to get into the Slido, it's enough to write slido.com, and you need a hashtag, which is PSE 2022. Like Pharmaceutical Strategy for Europe, PSE 2022. The main goal of this event is to allow for discussion of all stakeholders in the process of setting or creating the new legislative framework for the pharma sector, so please don't hesitate to ask. Even all the audience that is following us online can ask via Slido, but first let me, whom I'm talking to somewhere in the office or probably at home, tell you that you may need to adjust your frame so that you see all the presentations and all that is said here. You just need to click Fit to Frame so that you don't miss anything. So who's watching us online, click Fit to Frame in your Meet application, and you will have the right view of the whole conference. Also, one more technical thing to say at the beginning, please don't take any coffee or tea or food here. Water is allowed, obviously. Just we were asked not to do that. Myself, I didn't know that, so I have a tea on my table, so I'm sorry for that. I got to know too late. So just when you see that I'm carrying a cup from here, it's I got to know that too late. But we know it now. So now let's start. Let me ask Jakub Dvořáček, the Deputy Minister of Health of the Czech Republic, for his opening speech. I'm very sorry to do it now, but I turned at the moment when I've already started to say your name, and I saw that you were busy. Sorry.
No. What's the priority?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, and sorry for the disruption. I was so fascinated, that other speakers are coming, but it's just showing the interest of all colleagues from the Brussels environment. But I also see a number of colleagues, from Czech Republic, the representative of the industry, the number of people from scientific area, and also our colleagues from permanent representation, which shows, that this topic is quite a priority for all of us. And for our minister, and first of all, what I need to highlight it, that he's not able to come. So from my side, the apology that Professor Válek is not joining us today. I hope I will be able to replace him. But of course, if there will be, any direct question to him, no problem to pass it later on. So, the pharmaceutical strategy and topic of today's meeting is one of the key issues and key priorities for the Czech presidency. Why? From the early beginning, we agreed with my colleagues at the ministry that the Czech Presidency, the area of healthcare, should go around the patient. That the patient is somebody who is in the center of our discussion. And all the steps which we will do, doesn't matter if it is the legislative part or if it is the therapeutic area specialized meeting, needs to go directly to the patient, and every meeting should bring at least a small step towards the better access to the treatment to the patient all around Europe, which sometimes is in the conflict with the interest of the other stakeholders, because everybody knows, the situation in Europe is developing not really well. We see, how the budgets of countries are pressed by the current situation. So, the basic idea to have let's say, the best possible access for everybody to the best possible treatment, the latest innovation, latest possible drugs, but also the medical devices, all what is necessary to get to be treated well, also creating a big impact on national budgets. What is obvious, it was always the priority for the Commission, but also the national states keep it as their own, let's say, area to say, how the access, how the reimbursement will look like. So what I would like to highlight is definitely the importance of the industry for all of us, for all the stakeholders around this room, but also in the areas of healthcare. But on the other hand, we need to find the innovation not just in the new technologies, but the innovation in the way of access. We have to think, how to make the system more transparent, how to make the system, let's say, more and better working for the patient, and also how to make the system still manageable for national budget and for the reimbursement, which is, let's say, the big success of the Europe. If you compare the European patients and the patients all around the globe, I believe we have the best access to treatment around the globe. So this is something what is very unique. We have to really take care about that. And all of us need to find a way how to make the patients happy, also the industry happy, and also the rest of the stakeholders to survive in the system. And it's more and more important because you see, how many innovations the industry is bringing. If you go to the web pages of EMA, if you see, how many new technologies, how many new drugs are coming to be approved, there is a clear success in the innovation. It's clear success of the R&D. We never had, such a big number of new innovations coming. That's absolutely astonishing. It's great. And we have to be really proud that Europe was part of this success. Through the support, through the incentives, the IP protection and number of other tools, we created jointly the environment which support the R&D. Now we have a results of R&D, and we have to cope, with the way how to get those results to the patients and how to manage the price and final reimbursement for the patient. So we have something what is working very well, but we have to somehow adjust it, the final stage, the way how all those new technologies come to patients. So this is, I believe, the work which should come through the pharmaceutical strategy, through the all new legislation which is coming in pipeline. Unfortunately, the Czech Presidency will not get the chance to touch the orphan regulation and the pediatric regulation. Unfortunately, the news, we have it will probably come in the spring, hopefully, the spring next year. So it will be our Swedish colleagues who will take the lead, in the negotiation and discussion. I believe the Czech Presidency will work on that jointly in trial with our French and Swedish colleagues. So we will definitely try to do our best. But during the time, we still could come with the ideas which will help. And I believe that the industry, jointly with patient organizations and medical scientific societies, supposed to come with proposals which will be pragmatic, which will be implementable, and which will allow the national reimbursement systems to pay for that. And if I take, some small step back to the history, 15 years ago, there were the innovation. It was in cost of thousands of euros. 10 years ago, it was the dozens of thousands of euros. If you come to the current situation and use some of the new innovation which comes, through the EMA and FDA, the price starts on millions of euros. We have drugs which are, the price is asked like 2 2.5, 3 million euro per patient. Does those drugs brings the innovation? Absolutely. I have no doubts that there are a big achievement for the patient and for the medical professionals to treat it with such an innovation. Can we afford it? This is a big question mark. And we have to find a way, how to do it. Because if you take some of them and you will just allow to be all patient treated with such an innovation in countries like Czech Republic, I have to clearly say we will not be able to pay it. And it's not that we don't want to it, because I believe the Czech Republic has a very open system for innovation, but we will just not be able to afford it. So it's on the industry to start to think, how to reevaluate the pricing system, how to come with real innovation in agreements, which are, let's say, presented to the payers. We will have to sit with the payers on the European level, with their association, and to really set up some kind of system, which will make the whole, let's say, environment still alive. And I think this is one of the key issues which needs to come from the pharmaceutical strategy. Of course, it's important to keep to production in Europe. Of course, it's important to keep the R&D in Europe. That's something what I believe works quite well. Of course, there could be a lot of things with which we could make it better, but it's somehow working. But at the end of the chain, we have a problem. And the pharmaceutical strategy is something what's supposed to bring the answer on this problem. And I believe that nobody else than the industry can bring the solution on the pricing. And it was discussed many times here in Brussels. It was discussing a few weeks ago in the Tel Aviv during the WHO meeting, the Oslo Initiative, and a number of other important sessions. And all of the ministers, all of the countries, just named the same problem. So if we should have the innovation in Europe in the future, something needs to change. And this is the end of my opening speech. And I hope that we will get at least some answers today. And I believe that the events like this could bring the, let's say, space for the discussion between Europe, between the industry, and between the national states, patients, and scientific societies. Thank you very much.
Jakub Dvořáček and his opening speech. Thank you very much. I've already touched on what we mentioned in Senate of the Czech Republic in June, but now we have David Kolář, the Executive Director of the Association of Innovative Pharmaceutical Industry, who is coming up with more detailed summary and also recommendations that we got from that meeting and that we should base on right now. I guess that microphone will work as well. No.
Still not? Yes. Now it's fine. Premises of the permanent representation of the Czech Republic, and I'm here. I'm happy that I see so many faces and so many of you who attending the event, because I believe that this topic is really important. Jakub already touched this topic from perspective of the regulator, but I will try to summarize what we already discussed during the conference in the Senate. I will just try to go to the next slide. Yes, okay. So first of all, and before I will start, I would like to thank all of you who attended also the first part of the conference yesterday in the Prague House. I believe that all of you enjoyed the evening and that it was a nice opportunity to meet each other and to discuss. And I believe that today's part will be as successful as yesterday. You probably know that this conference is not the first one which we organized to this topic, to the topic of the pharmaceutical strategy and its regulation and revision. We already touched this topic during the conference in June in Prague. We started prior to the presidency of the Czech Republic. And I summarized 5 of the key messages which were mentioned during the discussion. You can find, let's say, brief summary also in your desks, but for those who are not willing to read it, I'll try to sum it up in a few minutes. It it's already in the title of today's conference. I believe that all of us are feeling that the European pharmaceutical legislation and its revision is a challenge and the opportunity at the same time. You can see that the last revision was successful from perspective of the Europe, but it's quite, let's say, in the past, and environment is changing so dramatically that it's necessary to be able to follow up. So I believe that the revision in final will be successful from side of the Europe, and Europe will be really more attractive than it is now. The second point is connected to the HTA, Health Technology Assessment implementation, because we touched this part quite significantly during the discussion. And I believe, and Jakub already mentioned it, that the key outcome was that all of the stakeholders who are at the table should be listened. Because it's not possible to make it only one-way communication. It's necessary to include everybody who is able to participate and who can bring the let's say, different angle to the discussion. And I believe that this is really the way how we should proceed, everybody. I know that currently the main discussions are about technical things in the implementation of HTA and about all of the methodologies. This is something which is really important for, let's say, practical reasons, and I'm really looking forward to see the result. After that, we discussed the different access scheme and the availability in different countries regarding the innovative treatment. Of course, current status quo is that the member states are having their rules in, let's say, different shape, and their approach is different from perspective of how they are really accessing the innovative treatment for their patients. I believe that there is still space from European perspective, how to make it, let's say, more harmonized, how to cooperate, and how to make Europe really attractive from this perspective. And this is something which is currently being part of the pharmaceutical strategy and its revision as well. However, I still think that it is not possible to be unrealistic, and my personal feeling currently is that some of the proposals which we already heard were a little bit unrealistic, and I'm happy that my colleagues from FPA came with several proposals. We are calling it FPA Access Proposals, and we are also touching them during the conference in Prague. And this is something what Jakub already mentioned, that the industry should try to bring the new solutions. I think this is the way how we proceed and how we will processing in the future. So I believe that our proposals will be part of the discussion, and that it will be, of course, part of the constructive criticism, because we need to find some consensus in the end to find the final solution for everybody. Number 4 was connected to patients. I believe that this is about any further questions or any doubts, because patients need to be actively involved in all of the processes. I'm happy that Czech Republic is approaching in the patient engagement quite in positive way, and we are the best practice and best example in most of the areas. However, I think that it's necessary to continue in this effort and to make it, let's say, as broad as possible on the EU level. Last part was connected to European health data space. This is, of course, the main piece of legislation which is currently being discussed, and I think it's also the most important part from perspective of the Czech Presidency, because it's during our presidency period. Jakub said that from perspective of affordability of the innovative treatment, it's necessary to think a little bit different how to, let's say, construct the deals with the health insurance companies, how to set the prices and pricing system as such. I believe that the base for this are the data, because data are currently something which is really the essential part and essential base for any kind of improvements or changes which should be in place. There are numerous proposals how to, let's say, how to approach this question, because of course we know that the affordability is one of the key and say basic principle which needs to be taken into consideration. But without the data, we are blind, and we can say, I will be honest, that the level of data availability, accessibility, and how the member states are working with data are super different amongst these states. And Czech Republic is not definitely the leader and is not in the best shape possibly. We are discussing this topic, we are trying to touch it from different angles, and all of the stakeholders are, let's say, feeling that data are critical. On the other hand, it's let's say, long run, I would say, and it is something which we really need to work on. From perspective of the European health data space, it will definitely not solve all of the problems which we are having, but it could, let's say, a little bit close the gap between the states and make the basic framework which can help us in the future. The discussion in Prague was great. We got a really nice and strong panel of speakers, and I'm happy that it should be and it will be similar also here. I would like to express my gratitude to all of the speakers who agreed to take the active part in today's discussion. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to all of the key outcomes which we will hear today, and I wish all of us fruitful discussion and successful conference. Thank you very much.
A wish from David Kolář. And now we are moving to the panel 1. The European Union is awaiting an extensive amendment of drug regulations. The expectations are high, and the new rules, well, no wonder the expectations are high, because the new rules will determine not only the pharmaceutical future of Europe, but also the position of the old continent on the global market. So, what are the possibilities for further development from the point of view of EU and national authorities or industry? That's what we are going to concentrate on right now. Let me welcome here Antonios Rodiadis, Deputy Director at DG Sante, responsible for health systems and medicines. I also invite here to the stage Kateřina Konečná, member of the European Parliament. Let me welcome here also Irena Storová, the Director of the Czech State Institute for Drug Control, and Nathalie Moll, the Director General of FPA. Those will be the panelists, and all of them will start with their presentation. But already this is the time for you to ask questions so that we can continue then with the discussion. I ask Antonios Rodiadis to start, because since the last time I think there is some change. And I will start probably with a question, because last time in June, we thought we know when we are going to get the proposal. That was supposed to be the 21st or 22nd of December. But I'm not sure if we still know that, or if we can still be sure about that. So, what is there for us? We should know. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Anthony Rodiadis. I'm a policy officer in Unit B5 in DG Santé, dealing with the authorization of medicines and also leading the development of the pharmaceutical strategy and the revision of the general pharmaceutical legislation. So, I mean, I can't say I was not expecting that question, obviously. First of all, before we go into the process, I would like to stay on two key messages that I heard this morning by Deputy Minister Dvořáček and David Kolář. I think, indeed, patient-centered is one very big priority at the moment. And at the same time, we need to enable innovation and to enable European business to deliver for the patient. And that is the important aspect, the important marriage that we need to make a success. And this was already apparent from years ago with the mission letter from the President to Commissioner Kyriakidis, that these two elements need to go hand in hand. So that's the bedrock on which the pharmaceutical strategy was born. And since the development of the pharmaceutical strategy and the communication back in 2020 until now, there's been a lot of progress. Consultations have been quite active. We've engaged with industry, with patients, with healthcare professionals, member states very closely in the pharmaceutical committee, presidencies with key events, and we thank the presidencies for their engagement. That's very important as well to say, but other EU institutions as well. And from this consultation, which I think was very fruitful, there were a lot of proposals, ideas. Industry, for instance, also developed its thinking around access, and that I think is a very good step forward to reassess a little bit the priorities as well. And this evaluation that we conducted, I mean, in internal speak, this is what we call a back-to-back evaluation of how the legislation has performed so far, but also an impact assessment of how our options for the future would play out, has shown that, number one, we should be very proud in the EU, because the EU is guaranteeing a world-class system for safety, efficacy, and quality of medicines. And this was not a given some decades ago. So that's an important message to communicate. At the same time, I think it was mentioned earlier as well, innovation in the EU is doing well. We have development of new medicines. We have increasing amounts of innovative pharmaceutical products being authorized in the EU, and that is something to be proud about. The thing, though, that we need to work on, and that was the main message on what needs to be fixed in the current system, is access. And you might have innovation, which is a good thing, obviously, but that innovation doesn't mean anything if it doesn't reach the patients, and does that throughout the European Union. So obviously, this is something that we need to work on. And I know there is goodwill in all parties, and that's a very good thing to have. So the pharmaceutical revision is actually trying to modulate the system a little bit in order to bring these two objectives more into par. Now, the revision has four objectives, let's say. First is to ensure access to affordable medicines. Second, it's to enable this innovation, for the development of high-quality, efficacious, cost-effective, and affordable medicines, but including also for unmet medical needs. Now, let's pause here for a second, because the notion of unmet medical needs, although it does exist in today's legislation, we need to develop it a little bit more. And the intention here is that when the key players like industry make the extra mile in order to develop medicines that cater for these needs that exist today, there should be additional reward for that. And unmet medical needs, of course, is a notion that we have developed with member states. We're discussing on what criteria need to be used, possibly put in the legislation, so that this can orientate our efforts into the future. The third objective is enhancing the security of supply of medicines across the EU, so we can address the long-standing problem of shortages. And this is not just a crisis-related problem. It is exacerbated by crises like we saw in the last pandemic, but also this is an integral, let's say, a problem of the system that we need to address. And fourthly, of course, and very importantly, which links to the attractiveness of the EU system globally, is to reduce the regulatory burden, eliminate duplications, reduce red tape, make the system a little bit more user-friendly, both for the regulators, but also for the operators, especially for SMEs who don't have, let's say, the same expertise and resources to navigate the system. So it's important to support those players as well, especially because they're very active in innovation. Now, the main policy actions planned under this revision will cover the whole range of what I've just mentioned. So on innovation, there are elements that will improve digitalization, both in how we authorize transfer information to patients, but also how the regulators work internally. We are planning to use the acquis that we have in the use of rolling reviews, the priority medicines scheme, and integrate that into our corpus of the legislation. And in this way, let's say, promote the innovative character. There's more on incentives, modulation of these incentives so that we can reward innovation that goes into the areas where we need it the most, affordability, security of supply, and others. So going to your question that you just started with this in the beginning, we are currently in the internal scrutiny process. We're doing a lot of steps in parallel, doing legal drafting and the impact assessment at the same time. And once this internal scrutiny is over, we will very quickly go into the adoption phase that will take us to the interinstitutional negotiations. This will happen in the next months. So I cannot give you an exact date. I mean, currently, if you look at the program, it is December this year, but it's really pending the internal scrutiny, which is about a high-quality proposal that comes once every 15 years, so we have to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonios. It was Antonios Rodiadis from DG Center. Thank you for making it more clear for us. And that was European Commission. Now the view of European Parliament, represented by Kateřina Konečná, member of the European Parliament.
So thank you, and dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first let me thank the organizers for inviting me to this conference. Let me start by saying that I obviously cannot speak for the entire EP or my colleagues from other political groups. However, given that I have been working in the EP on the public health policy continuously for the past 8 years and have in the EP on the public health policy participated as a Shown's reporter in all the legislation health files that have appeared in the EP over the past 8 years. And I can at least tell you what the expectation EP has for the revision of the pharmaceutical legislation. After all, the European Parliament has clearly expressed itself on this topic several times in recent years in its various resolutions, which has been many. It needs to be said that the EP has been waiting years for the complete revision of the pharmaceutical legislation, including the unsatisfactory framework of intellectual property rights. Just when it seems that we could expect new proposal, Brexit came and destabilized our EMA agency. Consequently, we had to work on this. The review was highly impacted by Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemics, which compound existing issues surrounding high drug pricing patients, unequal access or outdated patent law, and had been braving since the beginning of the last decade and highlighted several shortcomings in the EU's pharmaceutical systems. In this light, however, I personally see the COVID-19 pandemic as a somewhat positive, necessary wake-up call, which has relevant a full nudity to all what has been talked about in Parliament for decades without any results. During the pandemic, we worked on the building of the European Health Union. Now it's done, and now I hope it's finally a time to do something with our pharmaceutical legislation. I hope that 2022 will be the biggest year in the EU pharmaceutical law that we have seen in 30 years. For the first time in several decades, the European Union's pharmaceutical legislation is up for review. This means numerous key aspects how pharmaceuticals are regulated in the EU could be affected, from costing and reimbursement to intellectual property rights, intensive and more. If the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us anything, it's that our concept of intellectual property rights is very outdated and inadequate to our current needs. Leaving aside EU general pharmaceutical legislation that will be revised, I'm of course most interested in the orphans and pediatric regulation, therefore, and I will mostly speak about what I as me expect from these two files. Let's keep in mind that for 90% of the thousands of orphans' diseases are no specific treatment options, only best available care. And even if I take 10% of diseases for which treatment is available, only a fraction of patients will these diseases have access to this treatment in the EU. And it's crazy. I hope that everybody agree with me. And much needs to change to reverse this problem. Consequently, I would very much like to welcome the conditionality of intellectual property rights as intensive that have been mentioned in the provision consultation to enhance access to medicine. I also really like the system of conditions for manufacturers that is being considered. The system in which companies may obtain and maintain their IP rights or get a public financing based on a series of conditions that they have to fulfill is the right way how to approach the issue. Unfortunately, we all still have vivid memories of what happened with the patents for countermeasures and vaccines against COVID-19 when the public sector spent billions of euros on their development. And we must never allow this to happen again. Two conditions under consideration are that companies must launch the product in most, if not all, EU member states, and that R&D expenditure must be transparently reported. These conditions should have been applied long ago. Most companies are initially focused just on the big 5 markets in Europe: Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and UK, which is not acceptable in the EU single market. It creates inequalities between the EU citizens and problems with access to medicine. Citizens of smaller member states cannot be treated as second-class citizens in the access to medicine. Another potential negative under consideration to combat unmet medicine need and encourage broader patients' access in reducing market exclusivity for orphan medical products. According to what I heard, the Commission is considering reducing the market exclusivity for new indications and giving orphans exclusivity only to products defined as addressing unmet needs. Here again, we touch the problematic framework of intellectual property rights. Yes, I will repeat it again, only those drugs that are innovative and show a fundamental change compared to their predecessors should receive exclusive. Moreover, in their development was financed from public sources, which exclusivity should be shorter. Unfortunately, in the recent decades, the pharmaceutical companies in the EU has adopted the practice of evergreening of exclusivity for medicines that are only slightly changed and have no additional benefit than to defend one product against its competition. Finally, yet importantly, I would also like to see the practice of joint procurements used to buy the medical countermeasures against COVID-19 established during the pandemic to be reflected in the purchase of orphan medicines. I keep repeating myself at all the conferences where I speak, but I really see it as the most important and most elegant solution how to increase access to orphans. Purchase of orphans on the EU level will lower their price while increasing their availability. There are certainly many more changes that the EP or I would like to see in the new EU pharmaceutical legislation, but I think I have presented the most important ones. Whether the proposal to change the EU pharmaceutical legislation will achieve the aims of supporting patient access, encouraging innovations to overcome unmet medicine needs, and setting drugs pricing concerns is yet to be seen. However,
I can guarantee you the European Parliament will do its best to finally solve these long-standing problems. It's a massive change that it's likely to take at least 1 or 2 years of very intensive discussion between co-legislature. So I believe that the work on this package, whether it may be, will keep me busy until the end of my mandate. Let me assure you that I will approach the work of these documents with the utmost diligence and care. Thank you again for invitation, and I hope that we in the European Parliament are preparing for not easy, but very good work especially for our patients. Thank you very much.
Kateřina Konečná, member of the European Parliament, and the topic, a very hot topic of intellectual property right protection. Now the focus goes to the regulator, the State Institute for Drug Control of the Czech Republic. Its director, Irena Storová, is going to speak about recent approaches towards early access of EU patients to innovative therapies from the pre-marketing authorization perspective. The stage is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your invitation. And my presentation is about the recent approaches towards early access of EU patients to innovative therapies and pre-marketing authorization perspective. I would like to inform you about the content of my presentation. I will briefly inform you about marketing authorization of innovative medicinal products. I will mention updates on CTIS. I will give you a brief introduction to recent regulatory support prime, accelerated assessment, EU innovation network, scientific advice, horizon scanning, and about recent and other EU projects starts and project of increasing capacity of European Medicines Regulatory Network. Finally, I will mention also EMA cooperation with European HTA bodies. Okay, here is yeah, that's some technical. Okay, that's right. Okay, here is the list of medicines for which the centralized procedure is compulsory. That's, for example, human medicines containing a new active substance to treat, for example, human immunodeficiency virus or acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, cancer, diabetes, viral diseases, for example, advanced therapy medicines such as gene therapy, orphan medicines, and some veterinary medicines. According to EMA annual report, SUCL was involved in assessment of 12 procedures, in 4 of them as member of a multinational assessment team. Robust capacity of assessors and within European Medicines Regulatory Network, I think, is crucial for keeping timelines for assessment. Average length of the assessment of centralized procedure was 394 days in 2022, and we can see decreasing length of the time. Okay, that's first item, CTIS, Clinical Trials Information System, that's from the end of January 2023 onward. Submission according to the Clinical Trials Regulation becomes mandatory, and by the end of January 2025, all ongoing trials approved under the current Clinical Trials Directive will need to transition to the new regulation and to CTIs. CTIs should be fully operational from the end January 2023. And EMA increased capacity to remove bugs identified, and SUCL also provides workshops for academia and SMI on CTI's ambition of CT application. Okay, that's benefit of clinical trials information systems. That's, for example, the single EU entry point for clinical trial application submissions for sponsors, e-dossier, for example, fully electronic exchange of information between sponsors and member states, single ethics committee opinion per member state, and, for example, enhanced safety of patients, assessment of CUR and pharmacovigilance in clinical trials. Next, regulatory support. PRIME, was set up in March 2016 to provide early and enhanced scientific and regulatory support to medicines that have the potential to significantly address patients' unmet medical needs. The scheme provides a dedicated support hub to promising medicines under development, so that the developers can access the array of scientific input and regulatory support avenues available at the agency in the most effective way. This support will ultimately help patients benefit from therapies that may significantly improve their quality of life as early as possible. Prime medicines represent significant progress in their therapeutic areas. They include innovative technologies such as the first CAR T-cell therapies to be authorized, one-time potentially curative gene therapies, rare cancer treatments, and vaccine for Ebola virus. Accelerated assessment. In November 2021, the FPA Oncology Platform, together with Vintura and a wide group of European stakeholders, published a report in the series Everyday Counts, improving regulatory timelines to optimize patient access to innovative oncology therapies in Europe. And according to this report, acceleration of 15 days may save 4,200 years per year, and therefore every day counts. Scientific advice. Besides standard scientific advices or innovation meetings, there is some project within EU into enhance harmonization on scientific advice within Europe, and I have to say that Czechia is also involved. Horizon scanning. It's crucial to identify novel trends and methods. Therefore, EU, EN, and its Horizon Scanning Drafting Group is involved also in this activity. That's identification of emerging trends to identify areas where action is needed to be taken by the European Medicines Regulatory Network in collaboration with other stakeholders, to identify regulatory gaps, need for guidelines or legislation changes. STARS project, that's lack of specific relevant know-how in regulatory science delays the development of new treatment strategies or limit the chances that promising innovations will reach patients. STARS aimed to improve the direct regulatory impact of results obtained in medical research. 18 European countries were represented in the consortium through their national competent authorities, alongside academic and industry representatives and associations with relevant experience. The work plan included the development of a comprehensive inventory of existing support activities based on a detailed analysis of the currently established programs. This analysis was also the basis for development of a common strategy to strengthen regulatory sciences and 2 curricula, the core curriculum specifying essential knowledge for the professional training of clinical scientists, and the comprehensive curriculum defining relevant knowledge for specific postgraduate program. 3 pilots project aim to transfer and identify best practice example for training programs to other EEA countries, establish a new support activity addressing a gap in regulatory knowledge of significant relevance, and implement the comprehensive curriculum. This project delivered recommendations ensuring sustainable support of academic research and proposed additional support mechanisms based on a comprehensive analysis of needs. STARS had the objective to complement, coordinate and harmonize regulatory efforts among member states and at the European level to support academic health research for the benefit of patients. The aim was to reach academic researchers very early in the planning of relevant grant applications. A further aim was to strengthen regulatory knowledge in general by reaching clinical scientists during professional training and qualification. SUCL was also highly involved in this project. For those who are interested, there is publication of STARS common strategy on the STARS EU web pages that's here. And the project about on increasing capacity of European medicines regulatory network. As I mentioned, that EMRN capacity is crucial for rapid assessment of marketing authorization. There is now call for proposal within EU for Health. Proposed start of the joint action is in autumn 2023. Okay, and last but not least is importance of yearly communication between national regulatory agencies for medicine and or EMA with HTA. In the future, European cooperation between medicine regulators and HTA bodies will be governed by the regulation on health technology assessment when it takes effect in January 2025. I suppose that early cooperation between HTA and EMRN is essential to avoid delays in timely access of patients to innovative medicines. Joint scientific consultation for robust evidence generation is one of the agreed priority areas, and also exchange of information on assessments of medicines, for example, study methods and guidelines of real-world evidence, tools to support assessment in smaller populations, and some else. Okay, and conclusion. Not only post-marketing access is important to ensure timely access to innovative medicines, however, also pre-marketing is very important. That's my conclusion are need for EU harmonization and cooperation, need to build regulatory network with experts in novel technologies, need for legislation changes, and need for support of academia. Thank you very much for your attention.
Conclusions by Irena Storová from the Institute for Drug Control of the Czech Republic. Thank you very much. And about the HTA regulation process, we'll talk later on in the second panel more in detail. But now I think Nathalie Moll, the Director General of FPR, will be more than happy to react on what was said, and also tell us describe us the expectations of the innovative pharmaceutical industry regarding the revision of the pharmaceutical legislation.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation, for being here. Thank you to all of you for participating, and it's really Good that I went last, in fact, because in this time I've been able to hear the views of others and really reflect how the industry expectations, but also what industry has been doing in the meantime, working hard to come with some actions, not just proposals, how to adapt those. And MEP Konečná, I'd love to sit with you and discuss TRIPS perhaps once, because to our knowledge, certainly there are more than 1 billion doses that have not been administered, and maybe the issue was rather preparedness of healthcare systems than IP, but let's maybe take that offline another time. I think everybody already talked about this. What was the reason to do this revision? What were the objectives? They were very clear from the beginning in the mission letter. The president stated them again, the council. We, even though we had COVID, even though we have all the crises that we have, in fact, those make it even more important to get this revision right. It's the first time in 20 years. I was already here last time, so that just tells you a little bit about how long I've been around. But it's also a big undertaking. You can see on the right-hand side there how many pieces of legislation we're looking at and updating, and on the left-hand side the objectives of the overall strategy in which the revision sits. It's a fantastic moment to be doing the job that we're doing. All of us, I think, because we are participating in a moment of history. So I'm a scientist, I get excited about science. And the way biotech has been developing in the last 10 years has been much faster than ever since I've been studying it anyway. So the possibilities for patients are exponential, and we need to find a way of getting that innovation and then getting that innovation to patients, as Jakub said earlier and many other panelists said, because it is absolutely in nobody's interest in this room, including us, that patients don't get products. I hope that that's obvious, but sometimes I like to restate it just to be sure. The famous balance, getting the balance right between the risks and opportunities. Future-proofing regulation, hopefully the best regulation in the world, the most adapted, the most globally harmonized as well. The health data space, which we're all waiting for, novel incentives for AMR, maybe we can be the leader region for this and find some solutions. And then, a watch out on getting the balance right. And I think this is what you were talking about, Anthony, at the beginning with discussions currently ongoing. You mentioned it in your introduction. We can be proud, but well, I like to be number one, and I'm not number one in terms of treatment origin. Europe is behind other regions, but less than half of the new treatments come from Europe. And why does that really matter? You get them in the end, don't you? Well, guess what? The clinical trials happen here, and the more innovative treatments you develop here, the more patients get early access to medicines here, and not to mention all the industrial elements of that. So I want to do better. I want us to do better in Europe. I really hope that this legislation, the review, can boost innovation as well as backing access. Also in terms of approval times and expedited pathways around the world, we're not really the best in class yet. So you can see there the approval times in the top graph. If you can't read, so the European Medicines Agency is all the way to the left. We're not as slow as Swissmedic, I shouldn't say that, but we are slower than many other regions. And, we are not one country, we're 27. We have incredible expertise, so we should definitely be able to be faster than that. And it's important for patient access. Everybody has their role. I'm not saying that the approval speed is the only issue in access. We all know that. I think we've all studied this if we're sitting in this room. But there are things that we could do more and better. And the use of expedited pathways, again, the European Medicines Agency is all the way to the left. We don't make a hell of a lot of use of those. And perhaps in the revision with Prime and whatever just heard, rolling reviews being introduced, this will certainly improve. We have had lots of experience, and hopefully also the digital era will help us make use of that. Other issues, availability of medicines, you all talked about it. It's completely unacceptable, this graph, where I have 91% of products available in Germany and 3% in Slovakia. That's just not acceptable for anybody. It shouldn't, your access to medicines shouldn't be based on where you were born or what nationality you have. But also the delays in terms of getting medicines, there's a 7-fold difference between the time you get access in Germany and the time you get access in Romania. Nearly 2 years later. if or more, you might never actually get access to some products. So these are things that are unacceptable to everybody, not just to patients and regulators and members of parliament, but also to industry. This is not a successful industry model for anybody. I just want to make that clear. So we really feel as an industry that the revision is an opportunity to back innovation and boost access at the same time. Some things we can do outside the review and a little bit faster. And this is something I really am delighted to be able to discuss with you this morning, because you can't, in the review of legislation made for marketing authorization and for incentives, expect to fix everything. That would be great, by the way, but I really think, having studied now for quite a long time, all of us, the barriers to access in Europe, it's not that simple. And access needs to be fixed faster than the revision can even try to obtain. And I think that that's also very important. The evidence that we've picked up, as I mentioned, is wide variations of availability between countries, but also within countries. But also a difference in terms of the products. So you mentioned oncology products, orphan medicines. The access to these continues to vary, and it's very concerning. And as I mentioned, even within a country, we have issues. We studied the issues once. The following year, we did it again to try and find out what the root causes are, because before you try and fix something, you need to know what the problem is, right? Otherwise, it's a bit of a trial and error, and I have to say that patients do not deserve trial and error. This is one place where we have to take things very seriously. So we studied the root causes, and we found 10 interrelated factors. We published this, by the way, twice. And some of these interrelated factors, and maybe they're written too small for you to see, some of them are our responsibilities in industry, and some of them we share together. So after calling for a high-level forum to discuss it all together, and failing for 2.5 years, we decided to do what we could do to fix some of those delays and access problems without waiting for legislation and without waiting for others, without compromising. The first thing we did was commit in April of this year to file for pricing and reimbursement for all our products in all 27 member states. And this is not easy for our companies. We have SMEs in our membership. We have medium companies. We have big companies. Some of them have no presence in most of the countries. So this was a job. I think it took us 3 years to agree this in the association, because it hasn't been done anywhere else in the world. Nobody was asking us to do it. It was really something that we realized, looking at the root causes, 1 year, 2nd year, okay, we can't go on like this. But a commitment is no use unless you measure it, right? So it's nice, I can say, I'll do this, but unless I actually do it at the end of the day and you can see me doing it, it has no value. So we also decided to create an access portal. What will that access portal do? It will track that filing and reimbursement. But it will do more than track it. It will show where the obstacles are. So if a product is stuck in one country for 4 years, where is it stuck in that country? Where is it taking long? So that then we can home in and see what we need to fix. Because until today, it's been a finger-pointing exercise. They don't want to give us a price. They want their prices too high. They don't even go to that country. You can't fix hearsay. It's not a trial and error. Here you have to be very, very systematic, objective, based on evidence. And the third element, which is the issues of affordability, which is extremely important, and we also don't believe as an industry you can fix in legislation at all. We are completely committed to a system which is very complicated in terms of acronyms, equity-based tiered pricing, which in simple terms means being able to sell products at a price that a country can actually afford. And this is something that our industry is committed to. It's something that we try and do rather often, but the situation that we have in Europe, the reality of the single market, means that the patients who we have, countries who we have sold cheaper medicines to, don't have access because those medicines end up somewhere else, or external reference pricing. So we need, on that one, we've made a commitment, but we can't do it alone. We need to sit together with member states in solidarity and the Commission and decide how do we make this happen. Novel payment methods, these are things that many of the member states use for products. Sharing of best practice, I think, is very important. We published a report on what's happening in Europe already today. I think more can be done there. And then the European HTA, which was already discussed this morning. So these are the things that really I would like to put out there as very concrete actions. They're not proposals. They're not something the industry is saying we might do this. We are already doing this. Some of them we can't do alone. And some of them we will need discussion. And it's not through legislation we'll get that discussion, I'm afraid. That was the equity-based pricing. And this is just novel payment models. This is just to show you that there are examples you can't possibly read because they're so small. But subscription models, indication-based and outcomes-based pricing, combination pricing, over time pricing. There are really different ways in which our very innovative medicines can be put into a healthcare system and sustained, but it will not work for every medicine, and it has to be a discussion, and hopefully countries can learn from each other. Things that you can change in legislation. I think that's really important as well. So we can certainly make it, and I know my colleague Sini later will bring this up in more detail, we can get the best regulatory framework in the world. I'm completely convinced about that. We are 27 countries full of incredible talents. So the agile and competitive and world-class regulatory system should not be difficult. And also the right incentives to make sure those unmet medical needs that we've all been discussing this morning are also met. I think that, as I mentioned, my colleague will go into more detail, but what we need to make sure is that we have the evidence. So again, okay, we're very scientific in FPS. So when everybody talks about access, we looked into what the access obstacles were. Then we looked again just to make sure. We did the same for regulation. When we understood that there was a possibility of a revision, we looked really at what the obstacles were today, what was difficult. And some of the things came up that wouldn't surprise you. EMA workload and complexity of regulatory activities, the use of real-world data and evidence, electronic product information, trends in combination products. I mean, you name it, the complexity is there. And so after analyzing in detail and discussing with our international colleagues as well, because it makes no sense that we develop our own legislation, then it doesn't match that of the rest of the world. We came up with what we call the regulatory road to innovation, which is not all regulatory proposals. There are only 4. The other 8 are non-regulatory proposals, so non-legislative proposals that can be enacted faster, because we believe change needs to happen already now. And COVID taught us that we can be really quick. So on the legislative side, the expertise-driven decision-making, I think we can be faster in that. We have some ideas, the optimal use of expedited pathways, and it's really good to hear them already mentioned 3 times this morning. Giving EMA accountability for the drug device assessment. Our combination products are just going through the roof. I think it's important that, I know we've just done the medical devices and everything else, but science has a way of running faster than us. And then electronic product information, leaflets, which we've been trying out right now in Poland for Ukrainian patients to make sure that they can access information by scanning a box in their language. And it means, it makes a difference. So these are not easy things, I know. Environmental risk assessment is something else, Anthony, that I'm sure you're working on. I think that our proposal is on an extended environmental risk assessment approach. We see 3 situations in mind. So the first is describing patented APIs, the second deals with APIs where exclusivity has expired, and the third is for legacy APIs. And we really suggest that you take into account existing activities that are running in IMI. A lot of things have been done on pharmaceuticals in the environment, and there are even some current IMI projects like IMI Premier that are working to find some solutions. So I think it's important to integrate what's being done in what's to come. And last but not least, that difficult thing, making sure we can stimulate innovation in underserved diseases. And to do that, we really need to look at the scientific, regulatory, and policy aspects. We can't just tell science, well, you go there and find a solution, because we saw with COVID, it doesn't work like that. So many companies tried to find a vaccine against COVID by looking at their normal vaccine way of doing things and failed. We had 300 candidates, something like that, even more. And then we got it from an mRNA that was looked at for cancer. So science is a bit like that. I know, I'm also a bit like that. It's looking there, and then suddenly you can use it in another place. So you can't focus science. You need to do more than that. You need to unlock and de-risk and accelerate science. You need to optimize the regulatory framework, and you need to create policy pools. So we've been talking about the patient a lot. When I speak to patients, what they tell me is, I don't like the word unmet medical need. I want it to be unmet patient need. It's not about did he or she survive. It's about, are they able to live the life that they want to live, considering the disease they have and the therapy. And that is an unmet need. If they can't walk to school with their kids, that is an unmet need. So it means something to all of us here, seated here, but to patients it means something else. And I think that goes back to what you said at the beginning, David, making sure we involve everybody in this discussion, because the decisions we take today will be, I would say even 20 years, not even 15, will be valid for the next 20 years. And as I said, trial and error, not possible in the business we're all in today. So I think it's really important that we look at that patient perspective, the societal perspective, the healthcare perspective, make sure that the decisions that we take are in that sweet spot there in the middle. We really think that we can find solutions to address unmet medical needs, also in orphan and pediatric diseases, the hardest of all, orphans. Orphans is the hardest of everything. I think the hardest suffering, the smallest group of patients, and the most complex diseases. If we can get it right there, we can get it right anywhere, is my feeling. But we need a holistic set of solutions. And these are the ones that we have, and that I'll close with this. We're looking together, by the way, with Rodiadis, and Jan Lekam is here. We think that there needs to be something done also at the scientific level to address the unmet medical need in rare diseases. We're not going to fix it just with incentives. So we're looking for a moonshot for rare disease and pediatric diseases. And we have committed in a joint paper to work on that together. So I think we need to work concertedly towards developing the basic science and accelerating it. And it's from the studies that we've made, it's the most complex area that we can work on. Also, for children, we're proposing to add an area of work. So at the moment, we're suggesting to also have incentives for mechanisms of action. So even if the disease is not necessarily an area where you might have children's disease, if the product could have a mechanism of action that might work in a pediatric condition that is different than the adult condition, to consider developing that. So it puts extra pressure, I think, on us, but we understand the need here to go further. And again, this is a proactive proposal. On harmonizing the way a condition is defined, I think that's also important. And I really hope that we are updating the definition of condition in tune with current science. That focuses on the causes of disease, but also the organs in which the disease can occur. We're going further. We can find out things in a much more specific way now. And I think we need to adapt the way that condition is defined in the orphan designation today, and in the pediatric also definitions. And lastly, the existing incentives remain really important. I think we discussed, I was there when we were writing when I wasn't writing it, of course, but when legislators were writing the OMP regulation. I started working in 95, so I was there. And before that, there was nothing. And suddenly you had a framework of incentives for OMPs, and it made a huge difference. It really did work. And I really encourage us not to break something that's not broken, but to make it more adapted to science. And we've developed a proposal modulated, because we understand the need to modulate. It modulates up, but sometimes it also modulates down to be open, Anthony. I'll show it now in a second. But we propose to retain the 10 years as the baseline, to be modulated up or down depending on certain product attributes. I don't know if you can see it from there, but I can certainly give you my slides otherwise. But the baseline would be at 10 years. First in condition products or a very, very low prevalence would get an extra 2 years of market exclusivity. If you have a new active substance, a first indication, then you just get the 10 years. You don't get anything extra. If it is a follow-on indication or well-established hybrid products, then you get a reduction from the 10 of -2 or -3 years. And if you're also doing a pediatric investigation plan, then you would get an additional 2 years on any of those combinations. So I hope you can, this was really, really, really difficult, by the way. Our orphan companies come in all shapes and sizes. They're based in all different countries. There are SMEs all the way to the biggest players. This also took 2.5 years. So I hope that the effort that we've made to come with solutions that will actually work in practice will make a difference and won't be ignored, because we hopefully are being as constructive as we can be, having the patient in mind at the end of the day. I think these are my slides on Moonshot. I love them. I just wanted to show them. This is part of our joint statement, Jan, on Moonshot. I think it's really important that you see that industry is committed to going further. At the end of the day, we just need to make sure that when we discuss unmet medical need, we are looking at it in the broadest possible way as a condition that is not adequately prevented, treated, or diagnosed by authorized interventions. And we need to hear the patients. We need to have the evidence to decide other choices. So we need to have the evidence on the impacts of any choices we make, because again, it's the choices for the next 20 years. And I'm going to be a patient for sure in the next 20 years. My parents as well. I'd really like them to have the best possible care. So I think this is just my last slide. It matters where innovation takes place. Medical innovation is happening. The issue for Europe is where it happens. I think that it's important that what we decide on makes sure that we offer the best patient access, that our research community and SMEs and academia are supported. We heard it this morning. But also that we as a continent continue to grow. You know that this industry is the biggest trade balance contributor, and we want to remain that way in Europe. And we want to make sure that we are resilient for future health threats. So thank you for inviting the stakeholders. Thank you for taking all the time to listen to me, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Nathalie, Moll, thank you. When I was listening to you, I think I got a basic question. Is it possible to have a robust pharmaceutical industry and a financially affordable, innovative treatment at the same time? Who's going to pay for that? I think it's, definitely not for Irena, but I think Nathalie, Kateřina, and Antonios, that's the question for you.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible if we work together outside the review, because this is more urgent, and also because the legislation is it's not about access. If we work on looking at the 10 obstacles and how to address them, and everybody needs to be responsible and accountable for their part, but then some of them we have to do together. So some of them are not, I can fix some bits and member states can fix others and EMA can do others, but there are some that we have to fix together. Like I mentioned, selling cheaper products in countries depending on their affordability, we can't do on our own, because at the moment when we try, it doesn't work. So we need to find a system together, a way of working together that ensures the patients they were intended for actually get them. So I think it is absolutely possible, and I also know that we're all committed to it. So it's just not simple, but then little things in life are.
Antonios, Rodiadis? It should be on.
It should be on. Okay. So I think what Nathalie said is true. I mean, it's not simple at all, and it's even worse if you're dealing with 27 different health systems and 27 different budgets, national administrations, etc. Now, a lot has been done already since the mid-90s. With a central approval process. European Medicines Agency, there's a lot of cooperation. And I think one thing that we definitely agree on is that this legislation cannot fix everything. This is a piece of legislation which is about the authorization of medicines. Obviously, the incentives tool is a powerful tool that can influence behavior, and that's one thing that we should leverage on as much as possible. But it won't take us where we need. It needs to be basically combined with factors outside. And if I look at the 10 root causes of unavailability that FPA has identified, a lot of that also has to do with evidence generation. Now, we need to have regulators speak to each other early on so that there is no duplication, that there is one set of data that is produced for the whole life cycle so that this access chain is not broken at later stages. And I think on this, we're definitely on the same page. And obviously, joint procurement, better cooperation on pricing and strategies, etc. This is something that we're already doing, and we need to continue, because without that, this legislation won't be able to complete the circle.
Thank you. And Kateřina Konečná?
Yes, I think that the key is amounts of the innovative medicine that you are buying from the companies, because the market where you sell 5 doses and where you sell 50,000 doses, it's a big difference, and then we need to find solution. How we can work in this system. I understand and I agree that the crucial things, and I think it will be so the crucial things for future legislation, is that we have a 27 health system in the European Union, and it's very, very difficult to find solution for all these systems. I know how it was in HTA, and you all know where we are now with HTA. Sorry, but I think it was a big mistake from starting in the European Parliament and then continue in member states, because there was the big fall. And so it's the same now, where we are. And but we need to find solution. This is our joint our aim, and we need all working together. But it's not easy, especially in the health systems. It's not easy, because there we haven't some big support from the regulation from EU side, and then we need to discuss more with the member states, and that it's not easy, as I know.
It's never easy to find a common word for 27 countries, but probably we could still learn in the US. So, Irena Storová, it's a question for you, because the innovative products are usually authorized earlier in the US than in the EU. How to change this? What's the reason?
Thank you. At first, I have to say one nice example from Czech Republic, from the field of orphan medicines. Regarding the orphan medicines, we have a nice example in Czech Republic that it can work. For example, for treatment of spinal muscular atrophy, there are available all free treatments after negotiations between payers and healthcare professionals. But okay, that's the question. I suppose there is a need to increase capacity of European medicine regulatory network to have enough assessors team, capacity for scientific advice, and early contact with developers, and to increase predictability in decision practices of EMA and all of us.
I would say the predictability is a very important point when they know what to expect. Even though it's probably not that positive for them, still they know what to expect. And that's very important. We have questions coming from you as well. One is very long, and it's aimed to Antonius Rodiadis. So I'll read it all. Good morning, thank you for organizing this meeting. A question for Mr. Rodiadis on behalf of the European Alliance for Access to Safe Medicines. The European Parliament's own initiative procedure called for Europe to become a worldwide center of excellence for R&D in innovative fields of medicine such as nanomedicines. Would these not be areas for the Commission to revisit to ensure Europe's regulatory framework is equipped to support additional investment in these areas?
Thank you for the question. I mean, we're aware of the issue, and we have been in contact with relevant stakeholders on this. Essentially, the revised framework, I would say, would need to continue providing the regulatory pathways necessary for all innovative medicines. And as we know, for instance, now the centralized application procedure is open to certain particular products, and this we will have in the relevant annex, which will be able to update according to the needs in the future. So in principle, any medicine that caters to the specific, let's say, criteria for this pathway would be able to be placed there. At the moment, we don't have a particular, let's say, definition of nanomedicines in the legislation. I personally think that such medicines and or excipients can already be facilitated through the current framework even. But we're in contact with the stakeholders concerned to see how this can be taken forward.
Thank you. There is one more question aiming at you. I asked about the December term, but there is a more detailed question. Is there expected timeline for approval process? Would it be with the current parliament?
This, I should hope, is the objective, obviously, and that we're working. I mean, I can assure you that we're working very hard to do this as quickly as possible and with the highest quality as possible, so as to take full advantage of the current legislature. And this is obviously the objective. Yes.
I could, yes, we are in the European Parliament preparing, as I said, but in the other side, I know, and all you know, how is it in a trialogue now, and I don't know how preparing are for this huge debate at the member states, and then with and how it will be in the end. Yeah, the current Parliament, I think, will have a position, but then it's big trouble that if the law will be agreed in the current Parliament, that is another procedure. But we're doing everything from our side, and I speak with my colleagues because we are, I think that in the Parliament work on this topic 10 or 15 people, no more. That means that we are in touch and in contacts, and we are preparing to start work if Commission coming. And then I hope that the member states coming with their position papers, and then we will see.
If I make quick, I mean, we're not starting from zero. Okay, we have more than 2 years of contacts, resolutions, etc. So the debate has been.
By the way,
mature, yeah.
Has the preparation of the strategy so far shown which way to go, or which way definitely not? Is there something more clear, like, the assessment of, for example, the conditions for the research, for the innovative production here? We heard about the support, we heard about the property rights. Is there something more clear now from the Commission point of view?
I mean, in terms of particular policy elements, you mean? I mean, this is something that it's part of the proposal, so obviously we cannot go into the details of that.
I just wanted to go into the detail.
Right. I mean, we can talk in terms of principle, right? And in terms of principle, I think it's clear already from the roadmap, but, we've seen much more than that. Even in our public consultation, we even, almost described what are the possibilities. What is clear, and there is one thing that is very clear, is what I also mentioned earlier, is that we cannot, in terms of access, we can't just go ahead as business as usual, but I think everyone in this room agrees to that. Action is required. So, in terms of access, I think now we have a possibly common ground in terms of modulating incentives. A very interesting proposal, Nathalie, by the way. Well, it is connected to modulation. So it's certainly, because we started from a position where it was like 10 years of exclusivity, okay, in the orphan area, but also in the general area. By the way, EU has the most generous incentives in the world currently. right? I mean, even the US is a 5, well, for the biologics, I understand.
Nathalie will react then.
Not as so. I think that we are at the same level as the US. US has 12 years for biologics, so I think they're doing well as well. But,
Right. So I mentioned that as well. But EU is really, if not the most generous, maybe at least one of the most generous. And still, I mean, this is something we do not want to change, which means that level of incentives would still be available, attainable, or reachable. I mean, we just need all to work a little bit harder. I'm not just talking about the industry, but also the member states, in order, for the medicines to reach their intended recipients. And if that happens, that same level of protection will still be there. And that's an important point to make. So we're not talking about a pure reduction or anything. There will always be a standard level of protection for all medicines. The modulation would be about attaining these extra policy objectives, which I think from a political point of view, also from the parliament, have been stressed, many times in the past.
Thank you. Even that is the information that the intensives should stay at the level that are, because even about that there is a question mark here in the hall. But Nathalie, you wanted to react.
No, that, like you said, Anthony, and you also said, we all have the same objective. The issue for an industry is connecting, because you do reduce, right? So you go from 8 to 6, and you can get the extra 2 if you're on the market in all 27 member states. And that's not our responsibility. So you are reducing incentives from a purely industrial perspective, and you're connecting them to something that we don't entirely control, so those 10 factors. And that makes it just less attractive. I can't hide behind a finger there. It's just a fact. So I know the intention and I know the pressure. If it was there in 2016, it's even more there now with COVID, with the war, with the pressure. There is no money left. So I think we all agree on that. But if you make a policy decision that connects an incentive to an access reality that no one stakeholder controls, you are creating an environment that is not attractive to innovation. So that competitiveness innovation balance is out, and I'm not sure you're fixing access either, because being on the market in whatever number of years, even we had a hard time, so we did filing. Filing we can do, that's our responsibility, we file. Getting a price, we don't know. And going on the private market in some countries is illegal, by the way. In others, it means the products will never reach patients anyway. So I think we really need to make sure that we choose the right policy levers to fix the right problems. And I know it's difficult, because otherwise it wouldn't be a problem, right? So.
And Sini Eskola is adding one more point. If modulation of incentives, which is the lifeblood of a pharma company, is linked to access, how can it be fair? Because access is not only due to Industries Act.
I mean, these groups of questions are on the same thing. And I have to say, turning this principle into a practicable provision in legislation is challenging. But I mean, I don't want to go into the particulars of this, because it's too early to do that. And by the way, there's no decision yet about how many years, all these things. I mean, I know there's a lot of things floating around, but you might want to wait for the official, adoption of the proposal. What I would like to say, though, is that we're not living in a bubble here. We're talking to all the particular operators and also the member states to make this as predictable as possible, to provide legal certainty and pragmatic as possible. And this is an important point I would like to stress. So the modalities and the details of how this would work, our intention is to make them as practical as possible, so that it doesn't create uncertainty and it doesn't create unfairness, obviously.
Thank you. There are 2 more questions, but we are running out of time. We have 1 minute left. Probably, Nathalie, the one could be for you. For gene therapies, cross-border patient care might be needed. The existing legislation is very complex. What can be done to simplify this? Now I'm asking for the point of view of the industry. If you know what could help.
No, actually, my direct answer is I don't know what can help, but I know what works. So I know that in the area of orphan diseases, where a lot of the technology, there's also gene therapy. The European reference networks and the general, and Jan and would probably be much better placed than me to answer. There are ways to make sure that patients who need care can find the best center of excellence to get that care. So I know that where there is a will, there is a way, but in this case it actually works out. But I don't know, Jan, did you want to add anything? No. It's again, finding the right solutions in the most effective ways is really important. And today, I think the European reference networks are one of the great ways to do that.
Thank you. It's interesting how always the questions start coming when we are just about to finish. Quickly. EC, again a question. What are the concrete bureaucratic measures, processes, relevant to medicines that European Commission desires to remove from the EU legislation? Not easy one.
So I guess the question with the word bureaucratic goes to me.
Okay. I guess so.
Well, okay. I mean, what we've mentioned here is removal of duplications in the authorization process. One of the things that we're contemplating here is, creating an active substance master file, for instance. That's one thing that was also in our public consultation. The way the committees operate, also there's leeway there to reduce certain processes, internal processes that cost time and money, and these are things that we're looking into, and there's teams of people who are experts in the authorization process that are looking at these particular aspects. Now, this is like in terms of simplification, and then digitalization can also accelerate things. Electronic filings. These are stuff that happen in certain areas, but now if we can put it in legislation that might be a little bit more global and harmonized across the EU, because we have the centralized processes, but we also have the national ones, and this I think there's a lot to gain as well.
Thank you. And last question that goes back to our main topic that we've discussed mainly was the incentives. How would the incentives work when one member state decides that for the next 5 years they will not include any new medicine into the system?
Is that an exaggeration?
I guess so, because 5 years sounds a lot, but well, it's not my exaggeration, but
Yes, in terms of the incentives, as I said earlier, you need to have a system that modulates. The question is, if we have the same protection available there as is today, you wouldn't expect a big change. By the way, we're talking about modulating regulatory protection, at least for the general pharma. Still, the IP rules, the supplementary protection certificates would remain. So it's not one single layer of protection. There are different layers of protection. And we're just talking about modulating the ones that are in the general pharma. So we should also put that into context.
Thank you. Antonios Rodiadis, Kateřina Konečná, Nathalie, Moll, and Irena Storová. And your questions. Thank you for that. You can clap your hands, of course. Applause. They managed to answer all of them. Well, I better turn it off so that I don't see some more coming, because we don't have time. So sorry if there was some new. But we'll still have time to ask at the second panel. But for now, we have 30 minutes break for coffee, tea, and some refreshments. And at 11:20, latest, please, try at 15. Well, at 11:15, we would continue. So, bon appetit and see you here. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for interrupting you from your discussions. I know it's very important as well, but we will still have time for that after the second panel session. I would like to ask you now to sit down and leave the discussion for our panel session. You can ask the panelists later on. Once again, welcome to the conference. Pharmaceutical strategy for Europe. Now we are going to concentrate or to focus not only on innovative approaches to evaluation of new technologies, but also on sharing of health data at the EU level, as well as on the HTA, Health Technology Assessment Regulation. You still have the chance to use Slido to ask your questions. So just to remind you, is slido.com and the hashtag is PSE2022. PSE2022. But what's new for this panel, because we found out that some of you would like to ask a live question, which we are grateful for, so there will also be microphones available for you. Just raise your hand in case you have a question or a point, and you will get a microphone to get directly into the discussion. As we said, it's mainly because of the discussion of all the stakeholders. That's why we met all of us here. So now, let me welcome the speakers of the second panel: Sini Eskola, Director for Regulatory Strategy at FPA; Ansgar Hebborn, the head of FPA HTA Working Group and Russia's representative for European Access Policy Affairs; and Jakub Dvořáček, the Deputy Minister of Health of the Czech Republic. They'll join me at the stage. And yes, Sini Eskola took her place already with the microphone, because she's going to start with the key regulatory priorities for the innovative industry. How to future-proof, we can see, no, we don't see the name yet, how to future-proof the pharmaceutical legislation in Europe. And Sini Eskola, thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind invitation to this very, very great multi-stakeholder event. I much enjoyed the discussions in the morning, and with the emphasis, it was a discussion and a dialogue, which was really enriching. And I think the purpose of this second session is that we would present a little bit more in detail certain elements which are now up for the revision in the pharmaceutical legislation in Europe. Voila. So what I thought would be really good to look at is what does that future-proofing actually means, and what is the potential impact of the pharmaceutical revision overall in the operations, and now particularly from my background, regulatory affairs, what does it actually mean in that context? As well as I think the environment and sustainability Nathalie mentioned is super much in focus, so a few words about that, as well as resources. I think it was covered very well in the previous session. What is at the stake now when we look at the revision of the current pharmaceutical framework? So 3 sets of legislation: general pharma legislation, pediatrics, and orphans. All of them having their individual emphasis. But here you can see, and it's deliberately a little bit mix and match there, because you will understand, looking at the range of the topics, that it is really a massive changes that we're looking at. It is not a targeted revision. It is really a very overarching revision, looking at the aspects beyond the normal regulatory topics, as we would like to call them. So it is about transparency, conditionality of incentives, repurposing, security of supply, the digitalization, etc. So we have to, in order to actually be successful in putting a good proposal on how the changes are going to look like and how they are going to be implemented, one actually needs to have a very robust knowledge and understanding of how the biopharmaceutical industry works, what are the elements that actually is important in that whole value chain, but also how is it legislated? So what do we currently have, what might work or what doesn't work, and how can we improve it? I thought that this one would be an interesting one to see what the regulators' focus actually has been. I mean, we had Mrs. Storová from the head of Medicines Agency from Czech Republic, who already outlined the areas of what is important for regulators' perspective. But we also have the information that the regulators particularly have been asked to contribute with their views on 13 different aspects. And this also, in addition, demonstrate that it is a lot of changes that we can expect. Not all of them gets discussed because they are more of a niche areas, but this would give you the perspective, what is it that Commission is looking at based on the member states' input. So not only centralized procedure, but also mutual recognition, decentralized and national procedures, how they operate, generics and biosimilars, active substance master file. We heard Mr. Rodiadis mentioning that could be a way how we can further future-proof the framework in Europe, new manufacturing methods, core definitions. Nathalie mentioned definition of condition, super important scientific aspect on how we define a condition and potentially link rewards to that, etc. Inspections, reward evidence, environmental issues, reuse of animal data, because indeed preclinical operations are also part of the general pharma legislation. Product information, functioning of the centralized procedure, and some safety and pharmacovigilance aspects are also in the general pharma legislation, not only in their own specific legislation. So it's a massive list of topics, and there will be changes, some of them legislative and some of them non-legislative. And we are a big question mark from the industry currently. What are they concretely? So not so much information is available, even though we had that draft impact assessment available to public not so long ago. So we are analyzing that. I wanted to run you through the 4 key legislative areas that FBIA has been working with for the past years, basically. So going a little bit deeper on what you heard from Nathalie, what do we believe actually will move the needle to the right direction? And we really have gone a huge exercise of multiple years, collected feedback from our member companies. How does it work in practice now? Can we prioritize the areas of where we see the change can happen? And really asking ourselves, which I think should be the first question to ask from any stakeholder, does this need a legislative change, or can we actually improve the system via other routes? So I guess it was loud and clear that access, for instance, how are you going to legislate that? It's not possible, we believe, but how we can future-proof a legislative framework for Europe, there are some changes that actually legislation can help us with. It's a bit bigger for you, for the audience, to see really the concrete proposal a little bit more in detail. So when we say that we want to reinforce expertise-driven scientific assessments in Europe and streamline the decision-making process, so what are we actually after there? We're after for faster assessment procedure, removing the duplication in the decision making, and of course that leads hopefully to speedier assessments. And I think it came out in the last session, previous session as well, we need to look at where we find the best experts, how can we potentially look at that ever-existing conflict of interest that in some countries particularly is the hinder for finding the best assessors. Can that be revisited in a way? And really the decision-making thing for us is how can the different roles and responsibilities between the scientific committees be rationalized? What's the role of EMA and European Commission in the decision making, etc. So really tackling those. And I think based on the current dialogues that we have had with multiple stakeholders and particularly with regulators, in order to be successful in this, we need resources in the network. We need to look at that conflict of interest issue, and we need to ensure that there is the communication early on, how we exchange information, whether it's a regulatory information or information between regulators in a digital way. There are a lot of improvements what can take place. And there are these legislative pointers that can be tackled in that context. The second topic is the expedited pathways that gladly also was emphasized previously. So Europe, it doesn't look good here. I think from 2021, only 3 products got accelerated assessment. Fraction of products, I think 20 of those who applied, 20% only got accepted to go into the priority medicines review scheme, PRIME. And it is not available for indication. So those who work in the industry, clinical development and research and development know that sometimes the indication that is coming after the first approval can be the one that truly addresses the unmet medical need. So can we also provide expedited pathway, not only for first applications, but also indications that follow? And we're really looking there, issuing some long-standing issues that we're not using this toolbox in the most predictable nor consistent way. There are some consideration and a lot of issues actually. Resourcing, again, being the one. The role and criteria of unmet medical need, we accept that actually that has been the driver for eligibility of a product to enter expedited pathways. It's been already there. But now, because the definition is kind of debated and discussed, should that become too narrow, it will furthermore hinder the enter to the expedited pathway. So we need to be really careful. So the broad understanding of unmet medical need needs to be ensured because it will have an influence on different decision-making points. And here, for instance, to expedited pathways. Then acceptance of evidence generated as part of these more speedier assessments. It's challenged a lot by the HTA bodies and payers. So you come with conditional marketing authorization and, well, good luck for that actually entering any reimbursement scheme. Why is that? I mean, that evidence is as good as it gets still so far, and with the post-authorization obligations that come with such conditionalities, we should be able to provide the information then over time. And that's a normal thing what happens. We shouldn't somehow be against it. It is something that really needs to reinforce that we are able to find that acceptance level, and we have the evidence then that comes with the life cycle of the medicine and further developments that are done. So moving forward with the 2 last priority areas. So it was mentioned that drug-device combinations is growing, and actually based on the current pipeline of innovations, it is 1/4 of the pipeline that actually comes with that kind of product. So not only a medicine, but medicines that are combined with a device. And what the issue is today is that both of these, have their own regulatory pathways for assessment. So starting from the clinical research, you have to consult the different regulators to actually be able to use those. And not to mention, coming to the marketing authorization assessment, it is out of sync because there is notified bodies looking at the devices and regulators looking at the medicinal products. How can we improve that? Because it's not a niche area for the future. It's a 1/4 of the new innovations that are like this. So what we suggest is that there will be definition in the legislation for drug-device combinations, so that will create that predictability that is much needed and will drive the decision makers to define their roles and responsibilities in a way that you can get joint scientific advice early from device experts and regulators for medicines, and then in the assessment itself, there is one clear leader for that assessment. What else? So the last point is very much close to my heart because I'm a healthcare professional, I'm a pharmacist. I would like to see that there are better ways that we can communicate about approved information on medicines. I don't think any of us would say that that leaflet in a package is the best way to communicate the uttermost important information on how you take the medicine rightly, what are the safety concerns that you should really be monitoring, particularly it's a new medicine, etc. So can we, could we, and should we move away from that paper environment in a phased approach so that in the future we are allowed to have only electronic patient information, which allows then, it's all based on the approved products, nothing about commercial or marketing acts, but we should be able to, with the digital tools, provide, for instance, videos to children who would need to take an inhalation, for instance. So there are a lot of things where we can improve there. But currently, a legislative hinder in the general pharma legislation mandates paper product information leaflet to all medicines without any exception. So we need to move away from that and ensure that we take into account the digitalization of information in general and provide it on the medicines as well. I think I actually changed in the last second my environmental topic to resourcing. I just remembered. So Nathalie mentioned about the environmental risk assessment, which is in a super big focus, and we hope that through that we can improve how sustainability of medicines can be achieved. But what I wanted to actually end my presentation with was what Mrs. Storová said about resourcing. How are we going to solve that? Because resources are the driver for how many assessors are there. Can we use the expedited pathways? I mean, it doesn't happen with a push of a button. You need people who are experts in that particular therapeutic area there. And everybody who we talk to, so we started exploration now in FBA, we talked to ex-regulators from 10 different agencies and asked them what are the hinders that would hinder your member state to participate in centralized procedure? Well, guess what everybody says? Resources. It's resources. And it's a quite complicated picture, but I think agreeing on certain high-level things, and we heard how the medicines regulatory network in EU are trying to be very innovative, addressing the resource issues. So what can we do? We will be proposing later this year some concrete measures that would tackle this. And it can mean, and we've already declared openly, with the fees regulation revision, that's now a little bit postponed, but is coming as well. Industry is ready to pay more. Pay for service, like in US FDA. You know what you're going to get, but you are ready to pay more. Of course, we're not paying for inefficiency, so it needs to be secured that what extra money goes for is, for instance, directly to allow the competent authorities to have the experts in place, so headcount. Can we provide that? I think we're going to try that because it's been really one of the emerging priority areas that we need to tackle, and legislation gives some tools to actually address it. So I would like to end my presentation with that. Děkuji to Czech colleagues, and thank you for your attention.
And I thank you, děkuji to Sini Eskola. We move to many times mentioned topic already. We already have the health technology assessment regulation, but still we need to find criteria and procedures for a comprehensive assessment to be used across Europe. The time is still 12 January 2025 when the new regulation will be applied, and Ansgar Hebborn, the head of FPA HD working group, will now explain about how to add value to the future evaluation of innovative medicines. Ansgar, the stage is yours.
Good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to take here a slightly deeper dive on something that is already a regulation. I think there's a lot of discussion about creating new legislation. But I think it's also important to not only stop when a regulation is in place. I think this is really when the hard work begins to ultimately deliver against the objectives that were set out for a regulation. And I talk more about specifically challenges in this. Jakub, in his introductory remarks, he really asked for pragmatic and implementable proposals. That's exactly the challenge that we currently face here with this regulation. It's about implementation. We've entered the implementation phase. And this is where we face challenges in finding solutions already now after a few months into this process. There's 10 interrelated factors that this study that was already mentioned this morning highlights as the root causes of why there is unequal or delayed access in member states. Many of them, most of them, are really rooted in the specifics of the access framework, access pathways, access challenges, the funding, the affordability in the individual member states. They can only be addressed there. We can modulate incentives and whatever, but in the end, to make progress, we need to go there and work on concrete, tangible solutions. It's not only that industry has good ideas, there's other stakeholders as well, and I think we need to really think about what can address those. There's few areas, so a lot of this requires this significant step forward in the member state. But there are areas where cooperative action can certainly help to make progress. And I've highlighted two for this topic here. There's the speed of the national pricing and reimbursement processes. There's capacity involved at the member state to assess products, to take decisions, to reassess, to redecide. And the other big topic here related to the HTA theme is the misalignment of evidence requirements between member states. It's not necessarily on purpose. In most instances, it's not on purpose. It's just individuals. It's different individuals working in different agencies in different countries that had gone to different schools of thought, and came with specific ways and specific practices of assessing products. This is the theme of this regulation. Can I go to the next slide? Yes, okay. The challenges that this regulation addresses, they are real and they will stay real for a long time. So fully implemented, this regulation may be in 2030. But the challenge is that HTA has become a major movement in many member states, and oftentimes the same technology is assessed with very different levels of resources. In the field of pharmaceuticals, we have the EMA system, which creates a kind of synchronization of the timing. It sets a starting point for the weight indicator, a starting point for patients to count the days until they have finally access. This triggered all the discussion around cooperation in this field. So all these many agencies invest resources that maybe, this is the idea of the regulation, can be deployed differently. What are these challenges that are increasing going forward? I think there's capacity constraints. It's not only that in Slovakia there's a challenge with capacity, it's also in France. So if you follow your major framework of assessment of drugs before you take pricing reimbursement decisions, it will be difficult when the number of new molecular entities and indications as well grows over time, and it's growing. This is good. There is innovation coming to different patient groups, differentiated at higher numbers. We realized there's very different criteria that are applied when the same clinical data, it's really the same at this clock stop moment, or synchronized clock moment, that are assessed and applied. They differ between the EMA and the HTA agencies, and they differ between the HTA agencies. That makes it really difficult to plan these major investments in pharmaceutical companies' clinical evidence, to develop clinical evidence that fits the needs of all. And so it was really good to see certainly some intention to work towards common standards. Now it's getting even more complicated, and I think we heard about this. There's rare disease innovation. So it's rare disease innovation in many areas, even if this is not called specifically rare diseases. I think there is more targeted R&D for smaller patient groups, which has specific implications for the availability of evidence at the time of launch. Not always, but frequently, and more frequently. There's a different way of doing clinical studies. There's innovative clinical trial designs. They somehow are embedded in a regulatory decision-making process, but on the other hand, need to be reflected in the way how HTA agencies and payers take decision. And they can be. I think there is lots of opportunities. Not all of the HTA agencies and payers work at the same state. They have evolved as well, but it has to happen everywhere in Europe. There's an increasing number of biomarker-specific therapies where there's codependencies with other technologies, which adds complexity to the assessment of products. There's a life cycle approach now more or less everywhere. There's different approval pathways on the regulatory side. There's the idea of continuous development of data and evidence around the use of a medicine, which ultimately leads to some corresponding thinking at least, and hopefully also ways to address this in the countries, in the access pathways. There's a very fast evolution of the standard of care, which really makes it difficult to plan years ahead what these comparators should be in your clinical trials or in your dossiers, which requires some flexibility and methodological developments, or the ability to use indirect comparisons. That's how this is called. There's generally an urgent need to revisit these HTA standards and processes, or to continuously do so, to ensure that HTA pricing and reimbursement can ultimately cover this without losing their own standards, without losing their own roles. I think this is not about giving up the role of a payer. It's about evolving mechanisms based on the different type of technology and data that's out there. So what is needed? What is needed from an EU HTA framework? It needs more capacity. I described this. Clearly, there's more capacity needed. There's capabilities that are slightly different. They have to evolve around an evolving state of the art methodology. So capability building is an important theme. For stakeholders, I think we need increased predictability of assessment processes, related evidence requirements, and so on. We need capacity in the engagement with EMA, HTA agencies and EMA. There has something been developed that's meaningful, relevant to all parties, and I think we now need to have the capacity to do this and to offer this more systematically. There's the need to recognize that there's evidence beyond the LCT. This is not about giving up RCTs. This is about supplementing RCTs and evidence hierarchies, and how we look at evidence hierarchies in the light of different regulatory pathways, different types of technologies that come to market. It needs the lifespan approach, which is one of the biggest challenges for many HTA agencies and payers. They barely manage to assess the product at the time of launch. And when then there is the idea to assess incoming new data, that's a scary moment for many individuals in HTA agencies or payers that have to plan for this process. That's why there is oftentimes the lack of these resources, a no to innovative approaches to cover uncertainty. And there is and I think this is clearly something everywhere, where I think we've lost during the last years a bit. There is the need to effectively use and integrate insights of stakeholders and other experts in the process. Yes, there are conflicts of interests. There's many topics that we have to resolve, but we need to get back to where this was once, where we had the opportunity to find a better balance between insights from experts in a process while managing necessarily existing bias. I think you have to manage this in a smart way. The regulation is now the opportunity. It starts actually with the areas with most of these complexities. There's different reasons why cancer was a priority here, but we have it now also because it has these complexities, and we have to find ways to resolve this. There's ATMP, cell and gene therapy, with complexity even more. And there's orphan drugs. So this is challenging from an HTA perspective. If we start this in 2025, this is when we have to be ready. There's joint scientific consultations, horizon scanning, and there's opportunity to find the right areas where we want to do more. But at the same time, there's massive room for member states and stakeholders to make this successful or not, because it's a wide framework. There's not even anything you have to do if you're a country. You have to report at some point that you are not able to use, or you are able, but there's very limited currently set in the regulation itself. So it's a lot about the implementation phase, the work with all stakeholders, and to start monitoring the process of implementing this. Maybe it's some kind of stewardship of the Commission and others that is needed to make sure that this implementation phase will really deliver. Maybe to end this with 5 key areas that now, after 8 months engaging in the implementation of this, we think there's really more effort needed. So we need a harmonized European joint clinical assessment framework. There is some process of harmonization needed, which is difficult for member states, I understand, or for HTA agencies, but we cannot have in the end 27 processes next to each other at the same time done somewhere in Brussels. I think that's not regulation. If you have 27 different approaches just synchronized with regard to their timing, that's not workable. Sure, the HTA agencies know this as well, but the proposals we currently see are not going into this direction to resolve this, but we need a harmonized approach. It needs an aligned state-of-the-art assessment approach. I think looking at the technology that's coming and is coming in 2025 in front of these HTA process, we need to think hard about what can be used, how do we assess this. This is anchored in the regulation. There's relevant text and recitals that some of these areas that are foreseen here, disease areas, are challenging and which has to be reflected in the way how methods are set up. We need a purposeful interface with EMA. I think there is work going on, which is good, and has been going on, which is good move. But then there's an area where I mentioned, which I highlighted before, as an area where we are not where we should be. And it's really the active consultation of stakeholders, which includes, next to patients and other experts, industry and manufacturer. I think this is clearly where we've lost, where we're losing out already now in pre-work for this. There is the need to seriously consider the input that's coming from this. We as industry are committed to invest heavily into this process, but we also would expect that this input is seriously reflected upon. This is during the implementation, but it's also once this regulation is in effect and produces. I think we need to find a way to integrate the insights of stakeholders in the process and in the governance. And then I think maybe I'd close with this one. It needs adequate level of resources assigned by the European Commission in this implementation phase and also in the member states. I think the time is now in member states to think about what to use with the outputs from this. This is expensive. This is taxpayers' money that's invested. This is the resources of companies that are invested. There's very limited requirements of what to do with the outputs of this regulation. And that's ultimately not sufficient to make it successful. And the thinking about how you adopt national processes or how you open national processes to digest and benefit from this space has to be created now in these 3 years. And I hope we see a lot more active engagement, not just in Germany. Germany has developed a plan, a clear idea of what they may want to change, but also in the many other countries that have not yet started. Thank you.
Ansgar, Hebborn, thank you. And again, all the speakers mentioned the importance of digitization and data, and that's what we are going to talk about right now. It's a big topic of the day as well. The European Health Data Space. As said by the Commission, the legislative proposal won't only change how patients, doctors, researchers and policymakers access and use health data, it's also hoped that the plan will lead to billions in economic gains. So we want those billions but where they are and what needs to be done so that there are all those gains from European Health Data Space, Jakub Dvořáček, the Deputy Minister of Health of the Czech Republic, is going to talk about. Actually, it's European Health Data Space and its importance for providing new technologies to EU patients. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope it works. Well, yeah, it works. I didn't prepare the slides. The reason is that we are at a stage where it's difficult to say, how it will look at the end. But what the European Health Data Space tried to bring to us or to say to us, and we have to probably go a bit back, at least like 2 or 3 years, and to see, how the Europe looked like before the COVID crisis. It's 27 of very different systems, different reimbursement, different way of insurance, different way of willingness to pay for different technologies. And we are now, in the situation, there is a huge amount of legislation which tries to change that. And every piece of this new legislation tries to create the system which will be more united. And the European Health Data Space, I believe, is one of the key steps, for this unification of healthcare in the Europe. I will not talk about the primary use of healthcare data. It doesn't the topic which I would like to address it here today. I would like to mainly focus on the secondary use of healthcare data, because I believe it will create the answer of a number of questions and calls which comes from the previous speakers. If we are talking about the IP, if we are talking about the willingness to pay, if we are talking about the HTA and evaluation of the added value of the new treatment, if we are talking about how patients really benefit, from the new technologies and from the access to innovation, we cannot really do it in the future without the united health data space. This is the only answer which will change the situation as it is now. If the industry wants to really justify the cost, it needs to be based on the very relevant data. And the data which comes, from the real-world evidence, which comes from the daily life of patient. I'm not talking just only about the hard data from the treatment. What Irena Storová mentioned it. We have now the first molecule which comes, through the new pathway in the Czech Republic. And what is new on that is, of course, that the patients are they are part of the evaluation, they are also part of the decision. But what is even more important is that the part of evaluation are the soft data coming, from the life of people. And this is something, what only can be done at the moment, where we will have access not just, for the data from one country, but where we will have access to the data from the whole Europe. And again, the only answer on that is European Health Data Space. It's one of the key priorities for the Czech Presidency. We try to really, do the maximum to move it as far as possible. But I also have to say, it's one of the documents which creates a lot of emotions from all different levels of the environment. Medical professionals who are afraid, how the data will be interpreted, how they will share, what they generate. The patients about their privacy and the use of the data. Industry, how this will affect the reimbursement and the evaluation, if they will have a full access or only to the part of the data, how the systems will pay for it all the changes which are in front of us, how this new structure will be created, how the individual member states will lose the part of their freedom of what they do, etc., etc., etc. There is more questions and more pushes than the answers currently. And it will last for quite a long time, I believe, because this is something, and as I mentioned, it's something what will really change the way how we see the healthcare system and healthcare systems in Europe. It will be much more easy to see what and how is the access in one country and how is the access in the second country and the other countries. The FPS shows here the data from the WAIT report, but only the one slide. The slide which shows, that there are a very big difference between the member states in the access to innovative treatment. What are, in the other slides of that analysis, it also shows, how the treatment is reimbursed. You can see a huge difference between the full reimbursement, partially reimbursed, individually reimbursed, etc., etc., etc. And when you come to the detail, it's more and more fragmented, because you see that every state really works, with that in a bit different way. Again, to justify that will be more and more difficult. At the moment, we will see the real results of the treatment. And again, we will only see the results when it will be, united, in one health data systems. So what I will do now, to be the one of the individual stakeholders, I will really focus, all my effort to work with that. Because if you want to have a good legislative materials which will support the intellectual property protection, the reimbursement, and the other things, it will not work with the data which will show, the effectivity, but also the safety of the treatment, the pharmacovigilance, etc., etc., etc. Again, the answer is in the European health data space. If you go to the US, most of the data are already possible to easily get it from the system. The China and a number of Asian states, again, less regulation, much bigger access to the data. So if the Europe should be competitive in that field, from the perspective of R&D, the only response again is the European health data space. If we want to be able to regulate the pricing and to justify the price of the pharmaceuticals, again, the only answer is the joint data from all the member states, especially, if we talking about the 72 new molecules, 2021, or something like that, the number I saw there, yeah. So how many of them are orphans? It will be more than half, or 45%, something like that, yeah. So again, the data from one state cannot give you the real evidence. It's something, what will not justify that investment coming from national payers. So again, we will need the chance to see how those therapies works around the whole Europe. If we are talking about the joint procurement, again, if we will procure together as a Europe, and I believe, this is the next step, and here already shows it's possible. Okay, it was the vaccines and it was only the monkeypox, so not very costly therapy. It doesn't matter. What is most important is it's possible. There's no reason why not to do it. But again, after a certain time, we will need to do the very precise evaluation of how those therapies work, especially in orphans. We are talking about that with Jan, with our colleagues from Čavo, from Czech Association of Rare Diseases. And I see that also for the patients, to be able to justify that there is a very high cost for therapy. They will need, the access. They will need to see, how those therapies works around Europe. And together we can build something, what will work. And I mentioned it, in my first opening speech. The number of states, and we are not in one Europe. It's obvious. What is reimbursed in one country is not reimbursed in the second. And there is a big difference in timing. In one country, you have it the next day after the EMA approval. In other country, you have it in 5 years. In some countries, they have never the therapy coming. And it's not about it's not the fault of the industry. They just behave, how they are set up. It's the business. And they go there at those places where they can get the best payment. And if you have to invest, for the filing in the country where you have 2 million inhabitants, if you have to pay for the cost, I fully understand that in some situations they are really think twice, if they will invest or not. So again, to have more centralized access, to have a more centralized procurement, to have the chance to evaluate jointly what comes from the treatment, is probably the only way how to ensure that those new therapies, which are really costly, will be available. Again, it will be also very difficult for member states to justify it based on the data which comes from the whole system. So this is, let's say, the philosophy which I see behind of the European health data space. And as I said, we try to move it as far as possible. Just to give you the current situation. Okay, so after the French presidency, Our focus, the Czech Presidency is 6 working groups in July, then there are 4 working groups in September, and there will be follow-up working groups in October and in November. So I believe, that we really create the space for the discussion. We will see what will come out from all those meetings, and I have to say it's quite extraordinary, the space which were created during the Czech Presidency, for this topic. We are also looking forward, how the European Parliament will distribute this document between the committees. How the ENVI, LIBE, and the others will later take the part, in this discussion. Again, you can see it goes, from healthcare to the legal part to data protection. It's really touched nearly every area which you can imagine, in the European Parliament. Nearly every committee wants to at least touch it, partially this document. There's a number of members of European Parliament who loves the document because it really gives them the chance to talk about it for another years, probably. Yeah. So what we have to do, everybody, to push it through the system, because without that, it will die. There will be an election again, and the time is really ticking. It's really running, and I believe that all I mention it is showing, how important is that new document for the patient, for the industry, for the payers, and for the states, to create the good reimbursement schemes. So let me finish it with this let's say, the more philosophical than detailed presentation. Because what I can present it. Everything is now on the discussion. We are reviewing the parts. We are reviewing all that material, and we will do it in another months. So I believe the most important is to understand that everybody have to do the maximum to push it through. Because, as I said, no competition for the Europe, and very difficult time for the patient if this will not fly. Thank you very much.
Jakub Dvořáček, Deputy Minister of Health of the Czech Republic, thank you. We have many questions on Slido you are sending, but also I just want to see if anybody wants to ask directly here, so that we use the chance that we have. So any question that is not written here? Okay, then I start with all the questions because there are plenty. And I think, as mentioned here, regulation and legislation is one thing, but the implementation is the one that makes the difference and result. So probably the aim is also, when it comes to this, for example, there was a question to Jakub Dvořáček, can you share with us details from European Health Data Space negotiations? What are member states' concerns and what they see as a benefit? Who digitalized already think about?
We can spend hours, yeah?
No, we don't have that time.
But just let me to highlight it few topics which are in connection. There's a number of issues which are already raised, during the discussion in working groups. But when I focus the chapter 4, the chapter covering the secondary use of the healthcare data, it's the Articles 33 and 35. So, of course, the anonymization. If this will be, in the level which will really protect the data, and there will be no chance to then again reconnect it with the individual person. That's something, of course, what we are also discussing on the national level in different situations, especially with the rare disease. Of course, if you have 5 patients in the country like Czech Republic, you can easily then reconnect the data. But in the European level, I do not believe, it will be a big issue. But number of states, raise this topic, and of course, this back identification, that's something, what is heavily discussed in this field. Of course, what was very, let's say, what is discussed and what was raised by some member states is, if the industry is supposed to have access to the data, also from the scientific societies come this topic, if it is and I'm not talking just about the pharma industry, I'm talking the general industry, if those commercial, let's say, use of the data is really something, what supposed to be outcome of the system, It's not my question. I can see it.
There is a question aiming to that, because it's a great opportunity, but only in case that the data are being available also to industry to be able to demonstrate the value and positive benefit.
And it's planned to for the industry to has the access to the data. Of course, there are some limitations, like for example the marketing purposes. I know that. And I think it's more about how you define the marketing. Yeah. Of course, you can have the only, let's say, selling purposes of marketing. But I know, and I know I came from the industry, so I understand that for the industry it's much wider the definition. And if there will be this no-go, it will limit a usage of the data. So it's more, to really understand each other, how we define the pure marketing and, let's say, the data which are necessary to have the good information, straightforward information for medical professional, for example. Yeah. To mention it a few more, and I will be very fast, of course. I see it moving, so don't worry. Of course, the money. Yeah. The money and cost for the system, it's something what is member state essential. And I believe, this is the lobbying, and I mean the positive lobbying of the European Commission, and I'm not talking about the lobbying of industry. The Commission itself, the responsible DGs, have to really lobby, with the member states, have to work, with member states to really get them understand what will be the benefit. Not the benefit they will touch after 20 years, but a straightforward benefit at the moment. The data will be used, by the commercial subjects. And the profit, which could come back to the states, based on the investment, they will have to do it. Of course, it will take a time. It's not coming immediately. But based on the analysis done by Commission, it's look like that in few years, the system will generate enough money to feed itself, which is very important, but also to get some extra profit to more develop the system. So this is really something what needs to be very precisely communicated to member states to understand. 11 billion euros within 10 years. That sounds like enough. I hope it will be more, because it's something what gives the industry the chance really to do the let's say trials and researches, which they will have to spend the millions if they will do it straightforward with individual providers, hospitals, ambulance care. With the system, they will just in few clicks get the data. They will normally collect it for months.
Thank you. I saw, Ansgar, you were reacting a lot.
Yeah, certainly. I should admit, so 20 years ago, I lived in New Jersey and I analyzed real-world evidence data, claims data from health plans in the US. And the key question here is about the incentives. You describe a very strong incentive for the pharmaceutical industry to be interested in the outcomes of their products. But this only really makes sense if there is another side to it, let's say a healthcare system, that's really also committed to measure outcomes. I think outcomes are, of course, a topic in healthcare system, but there's other things. There's a lot of focus on the inputs, on the way how resources are distributed, not just outcomes. And there is a fundamental lack of incentives. I think to press a button and to have the results really requires, for many, many years, that there is another end that works on data structure and data quality so that it can say something about our products, how they are used and so on. This is a very, very long way. Still, we absolutely welcome, I think, the health data space, the vision that's behind this. We certainly will support the implementation. But as an economist, I would really say it's a lot about the incentives of the other parties that are really involved. Delivering the outcome of a medicine, and just to highlight this, is not just about the medicine. It's about the physician, the patient, how they're educated about the treatment, how they take the treatment, how they administer it, how funding resources flow to support this, to manage co-pays. I think there are many questions that will be at the table when this data is at the table, and that's good.
is good.
When we speak about incentives, I think the first question here on the list on Slido has to do with that as well. We recently saw on EMA webpage that there is a statement that biosimilars equal to original products. What is your view on that? Sini?
Yeah, indeed, we also saw it, and got a little bit by surprise, to be very honest, despite that there are many years-long interactions around the interchangeability of biosimilars, and I think it's correct to say that we trust our European Medicines Agency for doing a very good, robust scientific evaluation, so those biosimilars that come are, yes, you can say that they are similar to their original product, but it is completely different case that you have a policy statement encouraging interchangeability by pharmacies in countries. That is what it said. It had formulated very politically correctly, and they wanted to commit to the topic from very scientific perspective, because that's also true that because it's now left to individual countries' decision how interchangeability in practice actually works, that has been identified as a bottleneck, that because there is no strong statement from, now this time European Medicines Agency, countries are careful with that. But they are careful with the reason, because there are clinically meaningful impact sometimes when you have a biosimilar versus the originator. So what we put out, I think we put it out, or it's a reactive statement from FBA that I think we still need to continue the scientific dialogue. We heard from EMA that they're going to invite us to, or stakeholders, not only us, to discussion where this would be then addressed better. But it was a bold statement and quite surprising, to be very honest, to see that at this point.
Anyone to add something? No?
Or from the audience?
Just briefly. I mean, this is the discussion which runs for a generation. Yeah. But again, we are coming back through that, to the IP protection. Yeah. And how, this long or longer, equally with the United States, to be precise, IP protection works, and how it is really helping to create the funding schemes, for the real new molecules. Yeah. And in a number of situations, we see, that it's really very difficult, to work with the price when there is already, let's say, the number of choices. Yeah. And how difficult it is for member states, to really, push it through, this discussion, especially when you work with medical professionals, with all those professors and those who knows, the best, how this should be done. And this is again something, what we really have to consider, how quickly, they run this process, and how quickly to allow the access to biosimilars and to generics. And in case of biosimilars, I mean, see, those companies here sitting, all of them has usually the biosimilars. It's not that the original company is just doing the original products. It's always the mixture of portfolio, but it will create let's say also some ideas coming from FPR, from the industry, how to really make the best possible benefit from the generification or biosimilarization. How to help the payers to really move it with this topic. I would really appreciate it to see the discussion again coming from the industry, not the reactive statement saying I mean, this is bad and or this is not okay, yeah, but okay, I mean and the key word in that is reactive. Yeah, I would really expect again that it will be something what the industry itself will come forward. But of course, it's difficult because it's not a one industry. It's a fragmented number of companies, with different portfolios, with different level of generification or biosimilarization of the product. But it will help. it will really show, that you are open to do the change.
When we get to the pricing and reimbursement, there's a question. Scientific progress in human biology now allows companies to develop single intervention cures. How can we design HTA plus price and reimbursement systems to ensure R&D and access?
I think we really have to look at the specific challenge of individual products. I think when we talk about cell and gene therapy, the ability of a cure, oftentimes you have initial trials that are not really long enough to really prove, of course, the end claim that there is a cure. Not after 5-10 years you have issues emerging around this. So this is where you have to think about data. So it's about registries. You have to think about not only HTA. So from an HTA perspective, you could say, well, maybe there was just not enough data. We stop the process here. I think this is where HTA has to work, I think, and support the payment process. So where it's really then about finding ways that prices and payment schemes reflect the growing knowledge about certainty here about the impact of the medicine. So payment models are important as well. It's not just HTA at the time of launch.
Jakub?
A little bit different perspective on these individual prepared therapies. Again, the industry is living or staying in the Europe. It's fragmented on member states, and you have only few countries in Europe who benefit from the presence of the industry. If you take our region, the CE, how many of those companies sitting here are producing in CE countries? How many of them has the R&D hubs in our countries, etc., etc., etc.? And how the legislation or how those things evolving in Europe? It's coming from the member states. So, and we have in council. We have quite a equal power. So if the industry wants to really use the opportunity, and I believe the individual therapies is something, what could be, let's say, prepared. I'm using the word prepared, not produced, but prepared. More in the countries which are not obviously, the first country of the choice, of the industry. Because, if I take the new CAR-T, again, it's prepared in Germany and France. Yeah, why do you think that the country like Czech Republic or Slovak supposed to support the more reimbursement in that field if there is again the old footprint done somewhere else? If I go to clinical trials, the gene therapies and those advanced therapies, how many of them are really implemented in the Europe and in the countries of the CE region? It's a very limited number. And we did some footprint of the Czech Republic in clinical trials a few years ago. We have around 70% of new molecules had at least a small part of development of clinical trials done in the Czech Republic. Very nice number. I was really surprised. But when I get in detail, there was no one from those new individual gene therapies. So that they're real innovation. So again, if the industry wants to get the support from the countries, this is the right time and the right technology to really work more broadly, and not to choose those countries, Germany, France, and of course it's not nothing against the German and France, but.
Yes.
Can I add a slightly different dimension? Yeah, agree. I think we need to think. We really need to think about this. There's a certain part of Europe that's not on the radar screen. There's a certain part of Europe that's not part of this discussion here. Yes, the Czech Republic is now in a stewardship role. Yes, but usually you don't see a lot. You don't see a lot of Central and Eastern Europe. When you think of the EU HTA regulation. And who's implementing this? It's Germany and France are implementing it. But there are, now it's many that will implement it, but certain countries with a large amount of resources are taking a lead. It seems a natural lead. You have other countries that understand only cooperation will bring them forward. The Benelux, Nordic countries, Portugal has a strong role, but it's not Central and Eastern Europe. And this question is carried forward in many areas. Engagement of patient group. Why is this? And the question would then be, what can be done to have this part of Europe better articulating itself in discussions like those that we have here? It's a question, I don't know.
When we are here with the HTA, how to ensure that additional evidence requirements do not delay the approval of much needed treatments? Are rolling reviews done for COVID the solution?
Me and Ansgar should go for this.
Yeah.
Starting with the rolling reviews, I think, we heard from Rodiadis from Commission that they plan to codify prime and rolling reviews in the legislation. That's good news, because in that way there will be some predictability that in certain cases, probably the unmet medical need plus also rolling reviews in a health crisis will be much more available and accepted. I think we can't expect that all the assessments are done by rolling review. It challenges, I think Ansgar would confirm, if you have that kind of an approach and then the data even is collected beyond that approval. In many cases, like COVID vaccines, was conditional approval. You have to have that mindset that there is a limited amount of data. You have to know that it's when the approval or conditional approval is warranted, it is considered there are enough safety and efficacy to actually give it to patients or citizens. But the evidence requirements, I think, then how do we ensure that down the line on the value stream we have the same view on that? And I think the joint scientific advice, which industry very much welcomes and want to have more resources. So early on, the evidence requirements are discussed in the development programs, not only for regulatory approval, but also down the line to HTAs is one. So the rolling reviews will not solve it. It's rather the scientific dialogue and early scientific dialogue that would be most beneficial there.
I think it also requires this engagement of a payer. I think, yes, if there were no payer and you just had to take the evidence and you would just stop it. But I think this is, on the HTA side, a discussion about the resources, about the prices, about the uncertainty that's out there. So why wouldn't you engage with payers, not just HTA to EMA, but to payers, and find a solution to reward or somehow address and recognize incremental evidence as it comes in the price, in the payment scheme. So there are smarter ways to handle this than to make a clock stop and say, I cannot provide access, when the regulatory authority feels there is time for some controlled release of the medicine. There's smarter ways in many countries now. It's not just an idea of some industry person here on stage. There's smarter ways to address uncertainty and the resolution of uncertainty at the payer end.
Thank you. We have a question live from the audience.
Jan.
He gets the microphone and...
Thanks. Sorry to disappoint you, Michaela. It's not a question, it's more a comment.
Go for it.
Which I would have loved to make to the previous panel, because I was upset is a soft word to address what I heard this morning by some of the speakers who are not here anymore. So I had the opportunity to tell them directly. Yes, Jan Lukam, from Rodiadis, European Organization for Rare Diseases. But that's why I'm taking the floor, by the way, is that patients has been mentioned all along by the Commission, by your Member of Parliament, by industry. Patients at the center, fine. And all this revision, everything we're hearing is to address the needs of the patient, to be patient-centered, patient-focused, and to support innovation. Sorry, that's craps. It's all craps. What we heard today, again, it's not true. The only thing that counts is the money. That's the only question here. It's about that's too expensive and not sustainable. So just say it and just address it. And stop lying on behalf of patients. Because what I heard from the Commission is not what we're asking. Absolutely not. What Konečná says, and she's a friend, we don't agree. Can disagree with friends. So we had an excellent panel, if I may say. It's not because you're here and you didn't leave the room yet, but it was really excellent on the data. Thank you, and I agree. It's essential. Generation of evidence, that's a way to solve the problem. That's a way to be concrete. But when I hear things like, we grade Europe in terms of innovation, that's not true. 20% versus 48%. We're proud of that. So we've decided that we lost the war and the battle. That's true history. When people are telling you things like that, we're fantastic, you already lost the war. And that's what we're doing. We're buying weapons in Korea and to US. We're not able to organize army, which is absolutely a disaster in my view as a citizen. But we're doing the same in pharma. We're playing the music at the same time. That's what we're doing. We're not addressing the real issue. And now I turn to member states and to industry. I think I could sign up on every word you said, but you need to act much more. We've had this structured discussion together with FPA, and really I think we made great progress, and thank you for that. We're working strongly together with Jakub and the colleagues and try to have a call of member states, and there was the WHO, the members giving mandate to WHO. But we need to take action. Work together, the member states, to negotiate the product, to generate this evidence, show it's possible. Obviously, I'm preaching for my church. Start by the rarest diseases, because that's obvious. It's obvious, it's easy, it's no-brainer. Show that it works when we work together. We're going to need a crisis. We did it for COVID because there was a crisis. So without a crisis, we can decide to go to the extreme, the rarest, the gene therapy, the complex treatment, and try to do something here. But if not, we're going to have this modulation of incentives by saying that we have more generous incentives in Europe than that's lie. That's not evidence-based policy. We need to stop all that. We want cheaper medicines, then provide incentives for cheaper medicines. Don't say it's for unmet needs. Because sorry, but if I have a gene therapy for SMA, which costs 1 million, for instance, per patient, maybe what I want to incentivize is a new technology which costs only 100 with another technology like gene editing or I don't know what. Then say that what you want is a cheaper treatment, not an unmet medical needs.
Thank you. I'm happy that you said it to them directly. Because it would be more spontaneous than... yeah, but we were actually happy that they even came to hear... That's great. To hear the ideas.
But that we should not buy all collectively here, because here we have... All of us think that we are working on behalf of the patients by doing things which are addressing economic questions, because that's just rhetoric. It's not even...
That's why I asked the question, okay. Who's going to pay if we want to have the robust industry
but then we
and
need
also
to address
affordable
it. And
care.
we cannot address things in regulations which are not made for that purpose. Prime, including prime in the regulation, is a way to help for that. But then we need other non-legislative actions which needs to be taken in the same time and not to wait 5 years to get the regulation to start to work to the next.
Thank you. I go back to the questions. It's connected anyway. And Ansgar, this one goes for you. You introduced a very thorough list of measures that would significantly simplify HTA evaluation. What member states plus the HTA agencies think about it? What's the list good for in reality? Do they kind of build on that?
So I have to be careful to out them now in coalitions. But I would say those that don't have the resources to do a 20,000-page assessment, 20,000-page dossier assessment, those that have those resources and know they will not be able to grow them, these are the countries where you find the smarter approaches. This is where you also find the people that are more pragmatic. They want to get out. I certainly have seen Belgium wanting something to get out of this HTA regulation, which is reports that they can use in Belgium. I've seen larger countries that essentially mostly defended the status quo at home. And I've seen other countries that haven't even had the resources to think about this question.
So, very difficult with 27 very different countries. Sini, Eskola showed the long list of action points to adopt EU regulatory pathway and processes. Should we prioritize those within the pharmaceutical strategy? I guess you should say yes.
I would of course say yes, and maybe here, Jakub, should we somehow prioritize them in the legislative review, and can you help us?
I don't know. Easy to say, yeah. I really don't know.
Well, then...
let me evolve a little bit. I think there is we've been talking about that for quite some time, and I think in order to address the slow assessment time in the EU, which makes it completely unattractive, the use of the expedited pathway is the tool for that. So we've talked to the EMA, we talked to the heads of medicines agencies, management board very recently in bilaterals, and there is a quite keen interest to really look at that. Even the heads of medicines agencies chair said, we know we're slow and we're going to change it. So that gave kind of a nice confidence that at least from some of the national competent authorities there will be support for evolving the framework in that direction.
Thank you. I just quickly go through the rest of the questions. So I just ask you for brief answers. So we quickly go through it and still manage for the conclusion. What is the thinking of tier-based pricing from Czech Republic? Is it something that could be beneficial? Tier pricing in the case of Czech Republic, Jakub.
You really want to hear it? No. No. How we could benefit from that if we are living, in the open economic space? The Czech Republic is a source of parallel trade for generations. So how we should benefit, from the small for the lower price than in other countries? In the case it will be immediately re-exported out of the Czech Republic. That's the basic rule of the basic bone of the European legislation, the free movement of goods, and nobody can really limit the parallel trade. So in the case you set up the lower price for Czech Republic or for the CE region, then immediately it will be re-exported out. That's all. It's easy.
Thank you. Could the EU Transparency Directive be used to achieve access in a more timely manner? 180 days, since industry has committed to file for PNR, price and reimbursement? Another one. Most EU countries keep pharmaceutical spending in a siloed budget, isolated from the value produced in hospitals. How can we break down these silos?
Again, we can build on that, for hours. We have a minute.
1 minute.
I think the only chance, how to really, interconnect those benefits, which is let's say the part of the treatment. And in some of the states it's more achievable than in others. In the states where you have a different budget for the healthcare, different budget for the social care, then of course it's much more complicated, to get this evidence. In the countries where it is under the one responsibility, one united body, then it's much easier. And of course, that country will really try to see, how those things work together. In the Czech Republic, for example, we have two different ministries, two different budgets. So it will be very difficult to get this benefit. But again, I think this is the only chance, for the industry for the future, to be able to justify the cost. So yes, I believe, that if it is possible in the small country like Czech Republic in individual cases, We did it the first time for that SMA evaluation, that there was combination of both, social and health. Then, yes, it's supposed to be in the future the part, but it will be not easy task. That's obvious, and it's also visible from the companies, because we have a number of orphans in the Czech Republic who are individually reimbursed. And first, 3-4 months, Irena doesn't happen anything, yeah? But the first application for the orphan come, for this new pathway. It was 3-4 months, maybe 5. It was really long time when there was the first brave company who comes for that. Of course, it's new. And you know how it is. I mean, the industry is usually really touching that and play that. Now we have another 8, so it's moving. But yeah, it's usually
always someone has to be the first, then it starts.
I think it, as an economist again, it needs incentive, it needs funding mechanisms that look beyond these narrow silo budgets. Yeah. But otherwise, all you can do is you can prescribe it. You can say to the HTA agency, you need to consider this, this, and this, and this, and this. And you must do it, irrespective if the health system is not in charge of productivity costs and so on. But I think it's incentives and some clear guidance.
Thank you.
Wider impact.
One more question.
Yes, Boris Azais from MSD. Thanks a lot, Michala, for taking my multiple questions through Slido, and thanks for the excellent panel. I just wanted to, on the silo budget, there is a massive difference between countries, the few countries, I think it's only Germany that has, where the sick funds have a holistic view on their patient population.
The few countries, Germany.
And versus, Italy, where for the same products, it took us 7 years to get a product on the market in Italy. But that aside, I just wanted to come back on equity-based tier pricing, and fully agree with your comment. But the proposal, the industry proposal, includes addressing the issue of parallel trade. It is a grand social compact. It's a revolution, in fact, in how medicines are priced within Europe, but parallel trade is a key part of it.
You will have a very strong opposition.
Last question, very brief answer I'll ask for. Is there opportunity for innovation and early access mechanisms that are often MS-led to align them and ensure utilization of data across EU to demonstrate value?
Yes. I think there are very interesting initiatives that are outside of this EU HTA framework. One is, I'm part of an initiative called Real World Evidence for Decisions, and it really is trying to learn together. It's payers, it's certain countries, you will see this. Unfortunately, Central Eastern Europe, not part of it. But it's countries that try to learn how to use evidence for more structured reimbursement mechanisms. So I think learning around this is an important way forward. And some agencies are further ahead than others. I think that's an area where also some kind of competition is helpful to ultimately see how you can adopt, use, or not adopt, and learn from the failure of other countries in adopting such mechanisms.
Thank you. And the last note that is here is big applause for Jan Lekam. Thank you. And also I ask you for a big applause for our 3 panelists, Sini, Eskola, Ansgar, Hebborn, and Jakub Dvořáček. Thank you. You may move downstairs as we'll continue fluently with the conclusion. As the first, I give the stage to Pavel Sedláček, the chairman of the board of the Association of Innovative Pharmaceutical Industry in the Czech Republic, who will conclude about industry's engagement in the new pharmaceutical legislation, obviously.
Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I think the energy level a bit dropped down, so let me start with thanking all of you for really great discussion. And I have to repeat after Jan, friends and partners need to be able to disagree. I think what is the difference between partners, friends, and maybe politician is that we listen to each other. And I think this is the most important what could happen today. Also, definitely thank you for a great presentation. Thank you for a lot of great discussion during the coffee break. Very important. I'm pleased that we met here with representatives of European institution, Czech state and government and institution, patient community, experts, and all of us from pharma companies and our associations. It's precisely the joint discussion of all of these partners that is essential for further improvement of patient care through the European Union. I think we are all in breaking point of time. The pharmaceutical legislation which is now discussed will influence all the healthcare in Europe for next 20 years and maybe more. Yeah. Europe definitely needs strong, competitive, resilient, sustainable pharmaceutical industry to improve health of European patients. I'm still based in Czech, which is good, of European patients. And I really love Nathalie's point on changing unmet medical needs to unmet patient needs. Because yes, we are all talking about it, but the patient's needs and every single individual patient needs should be in the center of what we are talking about and what we are doing. Without strong pharma industry, European patients would not be able to profit from cutting-edge innovations and technology. It should be emphasized that current pharmaceutical legislation has achieved many successes, including improving access to rare diseases, pediatric patients. The new pharma legislation should build on these developments. Success will be measured by availability of new treatments and technologies to European citizens and patients. To achieve this goal, Europe needs healthy and functioning pharma industry that will also in future be part of world-leading bioscience community. We cannot pretend that achieving these goals will be free of charge. To translate the latest results of bioscience into really some tangible technologies is very capital intensive, and this is not free of risk. And we all see in the last couple of years that there is a huge risk connected, of course. The industry has proved that it is possible. Now we must find the formulas for a really sustainable development. Industry has presented suggestions. We expect really broad and inclusive discussion with all other partners, European Commission, European Parliament, patients, healthcare providers. I believe that is extremely important, not only to talk to each other, but really listen, and again, repeating this. As Mrs. Storová mentioned, and I'm extremely happy about it, in the Czech Republic, we have gone through such discussion, and we have really very nice results to present. Since January this year, patients, healthcare professionals are integral parts of the decision leading to reimbursement of orphan medicine. So the reimbursement decision is based not only on decision of HTA agency, payers, but really patients and the clinical specialists are included. We believe that this could provide inspiration for European space in the future. So now, while maintaining the current legal framework, new ways must be sought to support the future medical and technological development while maintaining the overall sustainability of health system. The innovation industry came with several concrete proposals, including equity-based street pricing, European access portal, novel pricing, and novel payment models. Like other partners visiting the health system, we believe that the way forward should not be taken in the form of further regulations, but more in already over-regulated system, but updating on the incentive system and structured dialogue between all partners. On behalf of innovative pharma industry, I would like to say that we are ready for this dialogue. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you all once again for your participations. Definitely wish us all that in the end we will see very practical, innovation-focused and patient-friendly system and legislation. Also, not prepared, but definitely let me thank you to all IFP office colleagues who prepared this wonderful conference. Michala for moderating, leading our discussion and making on time, I guess. And also for the Czech Parliament representation for allowing us in this beautiful space. Thank you for your attention.
Pavel, Sedláček, thank you. With the time management, not doing that right today. But you were too late on the coffee break, I'm sorry. No, I'm happy that you were very active asking the questions. And now it's once again time for Jakub Dvořáček. Yeah, once again, the Deputy Minister of Health of the Czech Republic, for his conclusion from the position of the Czech Presidency.
Really quite enough with me, and I think Pavel mentioned a number of important things. And again, I think that this meeting shows, that there is a way how to talk to each other and how to create the space where the industry and the administration of member states and the European Commission can talk to each other. This is, I think, one of the key outputs of today's meeting, and I hope it will continue. I believe that the Swedish presidency will also create the space. On the last, what I would be really happy to see, and I mentioned it already many times, I like that the industry is doing the positions, that you are bringing the solutions, but please, those solutions needs to react on current situation, on current environment. If you are proposing something, it needs to be implementable. And that's, I think, the key to open the door with the Commission and with other important stakeholders. Because, I fully understand what you created and that the solution is there, but to achieve it, the equity pricing and tier pricing and stuff like that, it will last for years. And it's important when Jan mentioned it, and I fully support it. We had the chance to talk about the access again yesterday in the evening, and I believe the only steps we need to work on the joint procurement for the European patient together with the industry. And I believe there is at least a part of the industry who understands that for ultra rare disease, this is one of the only way how to make access really equal. Without that, we will talk about those few countries who just, and okay, how long this will exist? If you take, the Germany, which was mentioned here many times, they're also changing the system. It will be not the free ride as it was. It will also change very soon. So this is the only way to really try to find, the solutions, for certain areas very quickly. And there is no time. I mean, at the moment when the draft of the text will be outside, what will change? Very little. It will be just, the small changes in the wording, probably. So there are no years for proposals. There are probably weeks or maximum months to have something, what could be included, in this development of the legislation. So thanks to all of you for the time you invested. Michaela, again, amazing. You survived it all the day. Congratulations with all of us, and it's not easy, I know. But yeah, it was really a great time and space. So yes, please take it, what we discussed it here, and hopefully we will be able to at least move it forward.
Jakub Dvořáček, thank you. I like the new measure of success of the event. I survived. So thank you all for the discussion. I have nothing to add, really. Thank you for taking your part in the process of creating the new pharma legislation, and I keep my fingers crossed for all of you to find the best solution for all of us. Thank you, and have a nice day.